fit it through the holes here. Yeah. Do you have any slides or anything? No. Okay.
So you can completely get set up, then I'll just do like a 5-minute intro and call you out then.
Fantastic. I'm good whenever you want to start. Here.
Necessarily have to stand behind these, right?
No, they catch pretty well.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Don't have to stand behind the microphones, no? Is this better? Okay, I will stand behind the microphones. Okay, so you're very welcome to the mini summit here this morning, everyone. Oh, that's even better. Thank you. Perfect. So you're very welcome to the mini summit here this morning. My name is Neil McGonigal. I'm a director of cloud engineering at Fidelity Investments, based out at Dublin. And part of my role, just by way of introduction while I'm up on the stage here, part of my role in the last year has been to develop and promote an open source community within Fidelity Investments. And that involved all the practicalities like workshops and mini jams and presentations and coaching sessions and setting the context for engineers around why it's important. And over the last year, one of the squads I was working with was developing an evidence store, essentially to capture deployment events for audit purposes, but also so we can understand how efficiently things are working in the process as well. So, collectors from GitHub and SonarQube, for example. So as part of that team's effort, they leverage CD Events, which is an open source project incubated in the CDF, and it's essentially an open source specification for CD Events. So we started to use that and also extend that specification. So that's how my involvement with CDF happened. And then I was nominated and elected to the Technical Oversight Committee, and that's how I ended up being a facilitator here today. So that's the background. And we've got some really interesting talks today. We've 5 speakers lined up and a Q&A panel, a diverse range of subjects. And we're going to start off with Jeremy Mice, who's an independent director of DevRel, or Developer Relations. And Jeremy's going to talk about something that we hear mentioned repeatedly across the industry, which is highly performing engineering teams. That's a term we hear bandied around a lot, but what does it actually mean? What does the role of DevOps and CD practices actually play? What role does it play when you think around developing highly performant teams? So Jeremy's going to tell us a little bit more about that. So a warm welcome for Jeremy, please.
All right.
Thank you.
When the machine goes to sleep, everything goes to shit. Hey, look at that, right there. All right, fantastic. Great. Thank you, Neil. Appreciate that. Yeah, going to dive into this pretty quickly and try and do, I think I was given about an hour and a half, I think is what we're set for time. So we'll try to get through here pretty quickly. And there we go. All right. So software delivery itself has never been more critical to success of an organization in a business in pretty much every industry. It's what really kind of sets, how well you can perform in that, really sets you apart from the other organizations and other companies that are out there. But those expectations for delivering something that's high quality have only gotten higher. It used to be, that there'd be the smaller groups of people that would have a really high performing team. You got the Netflixes and such. And now that's become the norm. And so those expectations have made things a whole lot more difficult, I think, for a lot of engineering teams. But also at the same time, the landscape of those tools has gotten bigger and bigger. This is the CNCF kind of cloud puzzle. Is probably one way to look at it. And in fact, somebody should make this into a puzzle. It's more and more complex, and this keeps changing. More and more things keep getting added to this. So how are developer teams supposed to kind of figure out what is really that necessity? What do they really need to succeed and beat out the competition? So hi, like I said, my name is Jeremy. I am DevRel and Community professional. The reason it says independent is because I am looking for a new job. So if you want to talk about that and what that means, we can chat later. Nice little plug, and you can find me on Twitter. All right, so in this period of immense change that we have, and the global economic uncertainties that we've all kind of felt over, especially over the last couple of years, has presented a lot of impacts for companies of all sizes, whether it's startups all the way up to enterprises even. But in this environment that we have, the stability and reliability itself has become increasingly important to businesses. The ability to provide that reliable, stable platform to customers has become that critical kind of value metric for how engineering teams get measured, and it's only going to continue to increase as we continue to see things change over the coming months and years. So one of the core tenets of DevOps and a solid pipeline is really this idea of continuous delivery. It's why we're here. It's a CD Foundation. If you didn't know, CD stands for Continuous Delivery Foundation. It's why we're here. This is just a very core principle about even what DevOps is. And so a couple weeks ago, I put out this question of, what does continuous delivery mean? How somebody might want to define that. Anyone want to take a quick stab? Fantastic. Everybody's still asleep. Good. All right. Well, I got one response. Tracy Miranda, fantastic person. She provided just a really good definition around, it's this software development practice in which teams release software that changes to users safely, quickly, and sustainably. It's a really great definition, and it goes very well with what Jez Humble had to say a few years ago at DevOps Day Seattle, where he talked about it's the ability to get changes of all types, including new features, new bugs, or new bug fixes, getting all those things, those experiments into production or into the hands of users safely and as quickly as possible in a sustainable way. In a recent talk given at FinTech, I think it was FinTech DevCon, Charity Majors, who's a CEO at Honeycomb, CTO at Honeycomb, talked about a list of these modern development practices, and with the continuous deployment, kind of continuous delivery point, she kind of focused heavily on the importance of deploying as fast as possible and as automated as possible. And so, over the last few years, we have seen a jump in companies that are starting to understand that importance, that Charity spoke about. But too often, we, see that's been done with kind of this grow at all cost mentality. And when that gets in place, that's kind of starts introducing more and more challenges. And we've seen the cognitive load necessary to keep those systems going and in place has gotten more and more overwhelming for dev and ops teams in order to put that together. And it's led to a lot of cut corners. I think we've all seen, at least it seems like, that we've had more and more outages across a lot of the core systems that we use in the industry over the last few years. And I think it's a direct result of this kind of grow at all cost mentality. So some of you are probably familiar of the different kind of industry reports that are out there. There's State of DevOps reports, State of Cloud Native, CDF has their State of Continuous Delivery report, and they're all kind of great for understanding kind of the industry as a whole. But they also are dealing more on survey data. And so what I'm going to talk about is based off of a report that was done. It's the State of Software Delivery report that was done by a company called Circle CI. That kind of dealt with actual raw data and kind of able to take that along with what some of these other reports go on survey data and understand actually what's happening with actual, verifiable anonymized data. So before we kind of even dive into some of these metrics, I want to stress there is no one size fits all for metrics because everything depends, which is a common DevOps answer, it depends on what you as a company are doing. What are you building? Who are your customers? Is it more internal? Is it more external? There's a lot of things that depend on that, and so there really is not a one size fits all. So kind of the four that we're going to deal with are duration, mean time to resolve, success rate, and then throughput. Those are the four that have been identified as kind of CI/CD benchmarks for what a high-performing team would look like. So, and then I'm also going to talk about the optimization steps, some of those that would be necessary in order to take that strategy and put a lot of these things in place in order to get to that kind of the holy grail kind of way. And hopefully we'll do it without getting concussions as well. So, all right, so duration. That's the first one here. It really is that foundation of what like a software engineering velocity would look like. But this unit of work that's kind of spoken about in the definition doesn't always mean that you're deploying to production. That could be something as simple as running a few unit tests to kind of get you things on a development branch that you can then start to make some other changes. So it's not just a deploy to production. And so it's kind of probably the best way of viewing this is as kind of this proxy for how efficiently your pipelines are delivering the feedback on the health and quality of your code. That's so essential to your development teams to be able to make the changes necessary. And the core kind of promise of most software delivery paradigms, everything from agile, DevOps, speed, it's all speed. And so that ability to take the information you get from your customers or stakeholders and respond quickly and effectively is at a core part of the duration. And this rapid feedback and delivery cycle itself is also just it doesn't just benefit your organization's end users. It's also going to add benefit to keeping your developers happy, engaged, and in kind of this uninterrupted state of flow. But when we exclusively kind of focus on speed, it often comes at kind of the expense of stability. So a pipeline that gets kind of optimized to deliver fast, unverified changes is really nothing more than like a highly efficient way of delivering bugs to your system. So it's important to kind of make sure your organization is not exposed to a lot of that risk and your customers don't feel that, is you've got to be able to move quickly with confidence. So having your pipeline guarded against any potential points of failure, it's important to have a robust test suite. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that as well. All right, so the duration benchmark, a good rule of thumb that Paul Duvall in his work in 2007 kind of set the stage, is keeping your builds no more than 10 minutes. Many developers who use CI follow that practice, and so it kind of keeps you uninterrupted. Anything longer than that can kind of interrupt the flow. That's probably about enough time that once you hit push and things start building, you go grab a cup of coffee, come back to see what the results are, as opposed to maybe 30 minutes or longer, and now you're losing kind of that attention span of your developer teams. So among the workflows that were observed in the data set from this report, 50% of them completed in 3.3 minutes or less, 25% were completed in under a minute, and 75% under 9. But then the 95th percentile, which isn't reflected here, but it was right around 11 minutes, which did reflect a lot more of the 95th percentile. A lot of those workflows were taking 27 minutes or more to complete. So many teams, when we think about ways to improve this, many teams are still kind of continuing to bias towards speed rather than robust testing. So the number one important kind of thing you need to be looking at when you want to improve this performance across all 4 of these metrics is enhancing your test suites with more robust test coverage. So that's, there's a number of things here. I'd say one of the biggest things on this is like code coverage in the pipelines, identifying, any of those inadequate testing spots that you can help alleviate, some of the potential challenges from pushing fixes that weren't adequately tested. So, balancing workflow and, test coverage, that prioritization is going to have to take center stage. So, that means asking, which of these features are really, part of that critical path that we need to make sure that we're putting in. Where can you afford more, experimentation, maybe on different pipelines. So all these techniques kind of here on optimizing, they're really kind of helping getting better buy-in from, a lot of your important stakeholders on that right balance between, test coverage and workflow speed. It's okay to have a longer workflow than 10 minutes if you're getting good quality testing feedback. It's also important to know that like when you think about like duration for builds, it's going to depend on what you're building. It might take longer if you're having to compile something. It's a big application. You're having to compile it as opposed to you're just kind of pushing some website changes. So understanding kind of what your builds are and setting your metric accordingly. So teams that are focusing only on speed, they're not only going to spend more time kind of rolling back all of those broken updates and debugging in production, but they're also going to face kind of this greater risk to their org's reputation and stability. So optimizing those workflow durations means you're really combining all of these good test practices with efficient workflow, and you all get to dance together. All right, so mean time to resolve. This is a metric. It's indicative of your team's resilience and your ability to respond quickly, effectively to feedback from your CI system. So it means it really is that best indicator of how mature your org's DevOps kind of adoption is. It's a really quick way to see that. The way that users in most organizations kind of see this is nothing's more important than your team's ability to recover from a broken build. So customers are definitely more likely or they're definitely more unlikely to notice any of those kind of incremental small changes, that steady stream that kind of happens maybe throughout the week, but they're definitely going to notice when they can't access the website or access that application. So, that keeping the mean time to resolve, keeping, those errors from the system and recovering from broken builds is extremely important. Martin Fowler kind of talked about this. The quickest way is just to get back to the last known green build to start with, and then you can adjust from there. And the whole point of working with continuous integration and ultimately that helps deliver that continuous deployment, continuous delivery mindset is you're always developing on known stable base. So getting back to that green build is extremely important there. It is recommended aiming to fix broken builds on any branch in under 60 minutes is kind of what the data shows is what that high performing teams look like. So depending on the scale of like that user base that you have and how critical that application is, your target may be significantly lower or higher. But this is kind of that sweet spot of what it looks like for a high performing team to be in that spot. It's going to allow your organization also to avoid like the worst outcomes of prolonged failures. So when looking at the data from the report, it showed that 50% recovery was kind of happening in 60 minutes or 64 minutes or less, which was an improvement from previous reports, which was about 10 minutes longer. The top 25% was in less than 15 minutes, and 50% of them, the top five, fastest five, was in less than 5 minutes. So that's typically you're seeing that with smaller, obviously smaller builds, but probably less feature-driven applications. So the first kind of step to lowering your recovery time is to treat like the default branch as the lifeblood of your project, as that kind of main chalice of what everything should be. So your organization is going to make sure that while red builds are inevitable, getting your code back to green is always going to be immediately important, and it should be everyone in the organization's top priority. A vigilant culture that you kind of have in place where everybody is poised to leverage getting back to that green build is going to provide your best chance of hitting those metrics and reducing the impact on your customers. Recovery speed itself is completely bound with pipeline duration. So, the shortest possible time to recovery is going to be, the length of your next pipeline run. So if your builds, your duration, and you've identified that your, acceptable duration maybe isn't 10 minutes, maybe it's 15. Well, your mean time to resolve can't be any less than 15 minutes because it has to, the build has to run again. So you're never going to hit that metric. So it's an understanding how that fits together. So along with mean time to resolve, success rate is that other kind of indicator of stability within your kind of application development processes. But the impact of your success rate on your customers and developers is really going to kind of vary according to a couple different factors. One of those is like, was the failure on a default or dev branch? Did the workflow involve a deployment, which there could be an error in the deployment, not really the build, or how important is that app or service? So that's going to influence how important and what your success rate when you set your metric is going to look like. A failed signal isn't necessarily indicative of something that's gone wrong as well, or a problem that has to be addressed like right now. Far more important though is like your team's ability to take that signal in quickly, which comes from that duration metric, and then remediate that error effectively, which is that mean time to resolve metric. Failed workflows that are delivering fast, valuable signals are going to be far more important than having a passing workflow and high success rates that have little to no actual information, actionable data for development teams. Maintaining the success rate benchmark of 90% or more on your default branches is a reasonable kind of target that that was seen through the report and in previous reports of mainline code of kind of a mission critical application, where your changes should be merged only after passing a series of well-defined tests. Keep mentioning tests; it's really important for software development. Topic branch failures are generally less disruptive than those that occur on a default branch. So if your development teams are doing a lot of innovative work and they're doing it on dev and kind of topic branches, which is where that should be happening, your success rate there is going to matter less because that's where that's where you're testing things, where you're trying things out. So having a metric on that you have to hit a certain success rate on your your dev branches is not as important as actually having it on your production kind of mainline branch. So looking at the data, the success rate on the default branch was 77% on average, with 67% on the non-default branches. The trends over the report data kind of showed that success rates on those default have pretty much held steady. And so a good standard is at that 90%. We're still kind of coming in underneath that. But we have seen like the pattern of the non-default branches, the success rate there, starting to get higher. And so we're starting to see that teams are starting to do a lot more testing on default branches and doing a lot more development there and less on the production branches, which is what you want to see. So throughput is kind of that last metric, and traditionally that kind of reflects the number of changes that your developers are making in a 24-hour period. It's useful as a measurement of team flow, as it really is tracking how many kind of units of work are moving through your pipelines. But when you're performing at or around kind of recommended levels, throughput really kind of puts that continuous in what continuous delivery looks like. Because the higher your throughput, the more frequently you're performing work on your application and getting it out ready to be deployed. Of course, it also doesn't tell you pretty much anything about the quality of your work that you're performing, because it really is important to kind of consider how rich, again, your test data is, and as well as how your performance on those other metrics like success rate and duration to really get that complete picture of how well your teams are performing. Because as with duration, a high throughput score means little if you're frequently deploying broken code. So an ideal kind of throughput benchmark really is, it depends. Typical DevOps answer, I know, but it really is going to be subjective to your organization goals. If you're a large cloud-native organization that is deploying a really critical product line, you're going to want a far higher levels of throughput than a small team that's managing kind of legacy software. Or a new startup that's working on a new thing. You're probably not going to need to be deploying, having a throughput of, hundreds a day. You're not the Amazons that, what is it? I think thousands, tens of thousands of times they're deploying a day. Like that's just you're not going to need that. So, you know, it really is going to depend on your organization and how you set those. Type of work, the resources, all of that. So in the data, the median workflow ran about 1.54 times a day, but the top 5% was running 7 times per day. So when we look at some of the previous reports, and I'll have aggregated data to kind of show that here in a second, but you know, there wasn't much change from the previous reports there. Overall, the average project had 2.93 reports that were run, pipeline runs in 2023, which was a little bit more than 2022. But, you know, while it wasn't much, when you look at the sharp decline in mean time to resolve, it is reflecting teams are committing to smaller, more frequent changes to limit a lot of the impact that is had to the organization and to the customer as well. All right, and throughput is really like, it is the most dependent on the other metrics from any of the others that we kind of talked about. How long your workflows take to complete. You know, if you're doing something that's going to take you, it maybe takes an hour to, you know, compile your build, which if that's the case, then that's your metric. You can't do 30 deployments in a day. Just statistically not possible. So understanding what that benchmark is for your org is going to be extremely important when you look at all these metrics first. So improving that team's throughput, you really have to first address all of those other underlying things before you can get to, you know, how successful you're getting on your deployments. It is also a trailing indicator of a lot of the other changes you have within your processes and environment. So, you know, rather than setting just some arbitrary, you know, pick a number out of a hat, you really got to have something that reflects your, you know, business goals, your needs, capture that baseline across all of these metrics to understand how you're currently performing, and then make the necessary adjustments. Achieving that right level of throughput really means staying ahead of a lot of the customer needs as well. So really understanding your customer and have a good feel for your product. All right, so when we look at all the data, you can kind of see these metrics over the last few years, see where some of the change is. You know, when you measure and then optimize these metrics, your teams and your company are going to gain kind of a really tremendous advantage over organizations that don't, which can really set you apart, have that high-performing engineering team that you really, everybody really wants to have right now. So you can get the report. This is a link. You can go out, either QR code it or type it in there at the bottom, and you can kind of get the report. You don't have to sign up for anything. You just hit the download button that Circle CI has out there. Definitely recommend. I'm going to post these slides as well, so that you'll be able to come back and reference them. Go. So thank you, appreciate it, and I'm going to be around the rest of the day and the next few days. So if you want to talk about, you know, what you all are doing or have some questions around some of these metrics, would be happy to chat with you. So thank you.
Great job, Jeremy. Thanks very much. It was great. It's always nice to see Monty Python and slides. Definitely keeps things interesting first thing in the morning. So thanks for that. So next up, we're going to hear from Natalie Vinto, who's a developer advocate lead in Red Hat. And Natalie's going to talk this morning to us about something called Tecton Chains, which is a new one on me. But Tecton Chains are a key element in building secure supply chain management. So really excited to hear more about this, Natalie, and you're going to take us through some practical examples and use cases so we can understand the importance of these chains. So
I'll try.
Thank you. Cheers.
You know what? With live demos, everything can happen. All right. Here we are. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time at the CD Mini Summit. The first time I see many of you in person, so I'm really, really excited about it. Today we're going to talk about Tecton chains and how it works. A quick introduction about me, for those of you that don't know me. I'm a developer advocate lead in Red Hat. This year I'm a CD ambassador. I'm really excited about it. And I'm also in the organization of Kubernetes Community Days Italy. I'm author of those two books, Modernizing Enterprise Java and GitOps Cookbook, and I have a link at the end of the session, so you can, if you want, you can download those books for free. So let's go ahead and let's start with the why. Usually when you buy a car, you expect that any part supply to be genuine, right? Moreover, for those expensive cars, you expect those are perfect. And what about the software? It should be the same. When we use a software, when we buy a software, when we adopt a community software, we expect that this software, the components of this part are all genuine, are all good. This is a very important topic. Let me share some scary numbers with you. Those are the percentage of software supply chain attack over the past 3 years. 742%, 20% data breach, compromises software supply chain. But the good number also that teams are started doing initiative to bring DevOps and security together because the attacks are increasing in the software supply chain. And those are the most common attack, right? Dependency confusion, a stolen certificate, malware, ransomware, any bad thing around. But dependency confusion and a compromised build environment, those are also very common attack. So let me start with this tale, right? A software development tale. I really like this diagram because it shows how development works for any company, for any project. So you have some developer teams that start developing one or more application, right? Development usually happens local laptop, local workstation, or remote, or even using directly Kubernetes. But this is what we call the inner loop. When you start coding, building, debugging, hopefully testing the software, and then you start pushing your code into Git. So you do a Git action. So your development is in the inner loop. When you move things to production or to deployment, to the CD part, to quote Jeremy, right? Let's talk about the CD. This is called the outer loop. So you move your software, your artifact, into kind of an automation that builds your software. And here's in this outer loop, you can have a pipeline that build, run compliancy tests, run security tests, integration tests, unit tests, deploy your software artifact into one or more environment, and then you are ready then to push this to production. Now, you see those are two loops, and they are very close to forming an infinite loop, because when something happens in the outer loop, you got to go back in the inner loop, or you need to add a new feature. So it's a continuous inner loop, outer loop, and the connection is always a Git action. So you have a Git push, then you have a pull request. So you start with the code review, and then you send to prod. I added to this diagram, this arrow here, the DevSecOps. So this means that security should be in place from the first time, from when you start the code to when you deploy this code into production. This is the ideal flow. And today we're going to focus, we're going to talk about the outer loop, how Tecton and Tecton chain really help implementing security aspect for your pipeline. We're going to talk about it in a moment. Sometimes I make some history jokes. Today I borrowed Geoffrey Chaucer, Canterbury Tales, and this is the start of the Canterbury Tales, adapted for this context. One dot dependency and this out. I'm not gonna say in old English, but this is really cool, right? Because this is a kind of a song that is in to the dependency and dependency tales. What I want to say is that we're going to talk today about how to secure the supply chain and how how open source software like Tecton help with that. Before we go ahead into it, let me give you some terminology for those of you maybe not aware of these terms. So one of the most common term is SLSA, which is supply chain level for software artifact, and then there's SAST, and then you may have heard about CVE. When there's a vulnerability, there's some CVE published in some public website. There's the SBOM, the software bill of material, the SIG store, but the important thing today is also the attestation and the provenance. So attestation about authenticated statement about metadata about the software artifact we're building, right? And the provenance is the record of the origin, the history and who made the change. So it's like more kind of a Git, but more on the software artifact. And SLSA is a very important specification and define also some levels. So level 0 is a best effort, is a kind of a dry run. And then you go into more levels, let's say level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 3 is really the one that prevent vulnerability, prevent injecting dependencies not expected. So level 3, you might want to have SLSA level 3 in your outer loop. And here's another good diagram about shift left. No, we start, from the final app goes to your user, and then you have the user use some networking, and they go to production. Now, production is the final result of all the artifact, software artifact, promoted across development, QA, staging. But everything starts as you as a developer, coding and pushing into Git. That's why the community, the industry is promoting also a shift-left approach from source to product. And what about the coding part? When we talk about coding, we usually use our favorite package manager. For Java is POM, for Python is pip, any of this, right? And we have our dependencies. So it's kind of automated, right? I need an HTTP library. I'm writing in my POM XML something, and Maven eventually downloads 2 gigabytes of stuff. I don't know what it's doing, right? Usually like this. But if you analyze what it's doing under the hood, this is an example with Maven dependency tree. It's downloading lots of stuff, right? And we don't really look at it. We have it as a given. But this is also very important. It's the way an attacker can inject a vulnerability as a malware, or is a single point of failure. If you remember when that guy from NPM removed that Node.js library and basically stopped the whole world for some reason, or if you think about the vulnerability log4j in Java, that was really severe. That was something the people start recognizing about dependency important after these issues, basically. Let me show you some open source friends that help you implementing the shift left approach. So you start with any Git repository, Git SCM. It can be GitHub, GitLab, whatever you want to use. But most of the time, your production is Kubernetes, right? And Kubernetes today is de facto standard for application deployment, application workloads. So Kubernetes has a really rich ecosystem of projects to build software. And one of these is Tecton. And today we're going to talk specifically about one extension of Tecton called Tecton Chains that help implementing provenance, help implementing attestation together with other open source friends like Cosign, which is another open source software that can sign artifact, and other software like Claire. Claire is an open source software that scan container image, consult a public list of CVE, the scan the image, give you a result per layer. Then if you're using Kubernetes, you might want to use policies, and Open Policy Agent is really a popular open source software for that, and you might want to deploy software in Kubernetes. So Tecton usually can build the software, can also deploy, of course, but usually build the software, sign the task, sign the container image, and then you can deploy with Argo CD, but any software for the GitOps, but Argo CD is one of the popular ones. So here's an opinionated open source chain for building secure software chain. So we're going to focus today on the safeguard of the building system. So we're going to focus on the outer loop. And I know some of you are directly involved into Tekton development, but I was wondering how many of you are already using Tekton? Well, that's a good number. That's a good number. For those of you not aware of Tekton, Tekton is an open source software governed by the CD Foundation that provides Kubernetes native CI/CD on Kubernetes. This means that you don't have to install an external software to run CI/CD on Kubernetes. It's native. You just install those what is called those API called custom resource, and you have pipelines inside Kubernetes. So you can do kubectl get pipeline or kubectl get pod. It's native to Kubernetes. So that's the default choice when you want to have Kubernetes being a CI/CD system. The good thing of Tekton, for those of you not aware of it, is that it's declarative, like anything in Kubernetes. You declare the desired state of your pipeline as an API. It's composable. You can insert into a pipeline multiple tasks. It's reproducible and it's cloud native. It means that it's native to the containers in Kubernetes. A quick recap of the concept, because in the quick demo we're going to see really briefly some of this. So the pipeline is a pipeline object, so a pipeline API, that can contain one or more tasks. The task in the pipeline can be sequential or parallel, but inside the task you have multiple steps. Those steps are sequential. And under the hood, those steps are just container image that are executed. Just because Tekton is a Kubernetes native, everything is a container. So a step is really a container, can be a script in a container, but it's a container running. And the task is a pod running in your cluster. Let me show you a quick Tekton architecture. So basically, you define the pipeline contains the task. Here's the thing different if you use other software for CI/CD outside Kubernetes. Also, the running object is a Kubernetes object. So you can do kubectl get pipeline run to see the live execution of your pipeline. And the pipeline run has a task run inside. So when you run the pipeline under the hood, you create basically a task that represent a pod. So you have your pipeline is composed by a task. The task is a pod. Inside the pod, you have multiple containers that represent the steps. Those are the overall picture. Let me focus today on Tekton Chain. So Tekton Chain is part of the Tekton ecosystem, and it has been had just to add those secure supply chain component we were talking about. How Tekton Chain can do that? Well, it can sign task and sign task result with cryptographic keys, and can also do attestation format like in Toto. We'll look in a second. So essentially can sign the execution of your task as a software artifact, and can also sign the container image that you generated. So you can, I'll show you in the demo, in the registry, you can have some kind of a tick that display that this is signed. The in Toto attestation is authenticated metadata for one or more software artifact. This is how it is defined in the official website. So basically, you can sign an OCI image. OCI is an acronym that means Open Container Initiative. So any container image today is an OCI image, Docker images, Podman generated images, whatever, is an open format. So you can sign this open format container image, and then you can sign the SLSA provenance attestation for the task run and the pipeline. So not only the let's say the software signed it, the container image signed it, but also the pipeline run is signed. You are signing everything in your outer loop. I like the logo of SLSA. This CyberDuck is super cool. But what it means the signed SLSA provenance. It's used for verify which build system produced the attestation how the build system was used. So it's a complete verification of everything. So, you know, usually in Git, you can see who made what, right, in the code. What about in the build system? Who made what? Who did that? Who signed this? Is that valid or not? So in this case, in this way, you cannot inject dependencies not expected, because those are not signed. And well, how Tecton Chain know that a task run or a pipeline built an image? This is done via what is called type inting. So when you create a container image, an OCI container image, you have the URL or the image digest. This digest is used, and then it's going to be signed. So Tecton build a container image, generate an hash. This hash will be used as a digest, and it will be signed. Will Chain just sign the image? Yes, can also create a pipeline that pretend to build a certain image. Yes, Tecton Chain can be all of this. And I want to show you in particular, like with James Brown here doing this. I want to show you a demo. And for the demo, I'm using the official documentation. You know, usually I take the official documentation example to verify that works, are up to date. So if anything, we can send a pull request. But this is really cool because it shows a really good example of signed provenance tutorial. So the first step is you have to generate a key pair with cosign. It's a public key, private key pair. So you do your signing with basically this asymmetric cryptography. Once you generate a cosign pair, basically you go, you can configure Tecton chains, and you can tell Tecton chain to use SLSA, and then you can create secrets in the namespace of Tecton chain containing your cosign key, the generated key, private key in this case, and the public key. So you configure Tecton chain, and then you move into the pipeline. So in this example, we're going to run a pipeline doing a Canico task. Canico is a building mechanism. It's an open source software that can build containers from a Docker file. It's agnostic. So this task will generate a container image. This image will be signed, then pushed in a public registry. I'm going to put to Quay.io. It's similar to Docker Hub. And we're going to see that this is signed. This is also important, the step 4. Chain observe all the task run, the snapshot the task run, and then convert the snapshot to standard pilot format, sign them, and store them in the metadata. So let's see that in action. This is the first demo. Let me check how much time we have. We might have used just this demo, but let me check this. So I'm doing this demo, and I'm using my Quay.io registry, and I want to show you that there's this CLI called Tecton. When you use Tecton, you can use this CLI that really help you starting a pipeline. I'm using Minikube in my virtual machine. I'm in my Fedora workstation. I'm in this namespace. So I'm starting a pipeline that essentially will use this task that I have already downloaded, and I'm show you what is this task about. So this is a Tecton task that build a container image from a Docker file. It expects some Docker file somewhere, and then it pushed this container image into a registry somewhere. So it's a really simple task, but this is just used to show you how it works, the signing of everything. So let me grab the log of this. It takes some seconds to start the pod. So when you use Tecton and you start a task, this will create a pod. So now this is a running pod in the Kubernetes cluster, and it's executing a step. Each of these are steps, so those are containers into the pod. And as you can see, it's building the container image and is pushing into a registry. Now, let me check. Let me show you what this done. I'm gonna do a Tecton task run ls, and I want to see if that is signed. So I'm gonna do Tecton the task run describe this one. Let me check into the annotation. I hope you can see. Yes. as you can see, this annotation has been added, and this means that Tecton is signing this this task. And also, you have an evidence of everything that is going on into the task run. And I want to show you that also the container image that we generated has also an evidence on the registry. So we're sending this. We're sending the container image over here. As you can see, this little tick here. This means that this tag has been signed with cosign. Now, I'm using QIO that also performs some security scan. Under the hood, QIO use Claire. Claire is the open source software that performs the scan. So not only you sign the task, you sign the container image with the hash you generated, but also you can perform some security scan. You can add this into your kind of outer loop build mechanism. So that was one part, and I have my script here because I want to show you that you can also verify with cosign that your public key has been used to sign that image, and then you can verify the attestation. I'm going to run this the command so you can see the output live, and we should have the payload of for our in toto attestation. So we also verify this with cosign, and then we can also a CLI called the record CLI that help us giving more info about what we have done. Let me check. This is another CLI you can download. It's part also of the tutorial, and give you for the container image, give you all the info of what happened for the SLSA provenance attestation mechanism that we did with Tecton chain. So that was one example. I want to show you another example, another demo. This was on Minikube. I want to show you this, that Red Hat also built a SAS around all of this. So Tecton chain, and the building mechanism can be Canonical, can be anyone. OpenShift in this case, Kubernetes, Open Policy Agent. So everything is over here, and this is implemented at SLSA level 3. So I want to show you, if we have time, a real app, and please stop me when we have to stop. I have a real application here, which is the Red Hat Cool Store. So it's a store where you can buy cool swag like a Red Hat hat. By the way, if you are interested, the hat is at the booth tomorrow at the conference. So here we are out of stock, right? And this is a microservice-based application. I'll show you. So I have a front end. I have 1, 2, 3 microservices for the backend. Let's say I want to make all this from the inner loop to the outer loop in a secure way. I can implement in my Kubernetes cluster with all the software component I was talking to you about. But I want to show you that you can also use a SAS like this that implement this, and you can do the same on your own cluster if you want. Let me show you how this works. Let's imagine we do one change in our software, like we want to increase the quantity of the software. Let me do this one. So let me do. I want to show you the full story if we have time. If we don't have time, I'm going to stop and show you what I already deployed, right? So I'm going to start this Java application, the development mode, which also has a continuous testing mode. For some reason, my port 88 is busy, but I don't need it at the moment. Let's imagine we want to increase that Fedora quantity, to 10. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to resume the testing. So the first step in your secure software supply chain is to verify in the inner loop if everything is fine. Now, I changed the code. I haven't updated the test. This is really bad. So I need to update my test as well. And Quarkus and the continuous testing mode really help with that. Let me check what I've done here. Look, test failed. Java runtime. I'm making something really bad. Oh, the port 88 is built. Okay, sorry about it. For some reason, the port 88 is busy. But I wanted to show you that you need to update the test. You need to eventually perform some security scan locally, and for that, Red Hat provides what we call the dependency analytics report, extension. It's just an extension that analyzes your dependency file like a POM XML and provides you early some security scan. So before you move into the outer loop, let's say this is in collaboration with Nick. I have some kind of important severity in my in-memory database. So let's imagine I'm not going to use in-memory database in production. So let's imagine this is good. But here I could stop. No, I can stop. I can avoid sending this to production. Now, let me update the quantity to 10, and let me push, adding to the staging area. I want to show you what you can do. So when we push the application, when we git push, a webhook automatically will start a Tecton pipeline. And this tool is using pipeline as a code to build automatically the pipeline. Let me show you the source code over here. Here we go. So when you use the tool, it's going to inject in your Git repo Tecton pipeline as a code. And for any push or any pull request, this is going to start again the pipeline with the task, and the task is going to build everything. Now, this is something you can build out of the box without Tecton chain. But let me show you the cool thing. When you use Tecton chain and all the ecosystem, you can perform your pipeline security scan. And here's something cool. Not only the CLAIRE scan, so the container image scan, the antivirus scan, but also the software bill of material check, SAST check. So it's a complete suite, and the Tecton chain then is used to push this image into the query registry. So I'm doing the same stuff I was doing into Minikube. It's a little bit more, it's more extensive, right? But I'm showing you that this application, which has been pushed into the production, let's say, with the tool, is using a container image on this registry again, and this is signed with Tecton chain and cosign in the same way we were doing with Minikube. So as you can see, I'm using the same mechanism from a SaaS, and that SaaS is also adding more stuff like enterprise contract, antivirus scan, container image scan. So you can really build something similar on your own with your Kubernetes cluster, with Tecton, Tecton chain, CLAIRE, OPA, Kubernetes, Argo CD. You can automate really everything. And GitHub is not responding. And what about the other tasks that might interest you? We have this panel about secure software supply chain. If you are interested on the topic, please join us. This is on Tuesday, so it's tomorrow. We're going to talk about SLSA, and we're going to talk about OpenSSF. So you are more in security and those topics, please join this talk because it's really interesting. That was the talk. I hope you enjoyed the live demos with all the consequences. And if you are interested to know more about Tecton, this is, I think this is a good book because it starts from zero to GitOps. So there's is a list of recipes containing how to build containers, how to create a Helm chart, how to use customize. And then it goes into how to create Tecton pipeline, or Tecton task, and then move into Argo CD, how to use Argo CD as a CD tool, and then Tecton as kind of a CI/CD tool. So there's no Tecton chain in version 1, but I hope to add in version 2 the Tecton chain part. If you are interested to know more about Red Hat and Red Hat Developer, join us on developersredhat.com with many things of free books and tutorials and everything around developers. And yeah, thank you all.
Very good. Thank you, Natalie. Very, very interesting session. So next up, we're going to hear from Anna Doherty, who's the Director of Product Marketing at Opsera. And Anna's going to talk to us about some of the challenges that engineers face and how continuous deployment can help address them. And she's going to talk about something that's very familiar to me, mentioning door metrics, which is a key way in understanding how well we're we're doing continuous delivery and deployment. So please give a warm welcome for Anna, please. I should say as well, we'll have a 20-minute break after Anna's session to grab coffees and stuff. Okay, thank you.
All right, hopefully I'm exciting enough that you don't need a coffee before my session. Let's see. So I just popped off a plane. I was trapped overnight in Madrid, which wasn't the worst thing in the world. You can be trapped, worse places, I think. So forgive me if I'm like the most insane you've ever seen. Wait, let's see. Do we have Can someone help me out here? Where's the Mac plug? I need a plug for Mac. USB-C? Yep, I have USB-C. Ah, great. Thank you. Well, let's see. All right. Hey, great. Fantastic. All right. So, thank you for that introduction. It made it sound way more boring than I promised this will be. I was like, oh, great. Everybody loves hearing about Dorometrics. I bet they can't wait to hear this. No, that's not what this is. This is actually meant to be more like some ways you can take some of those awesome buzzwords that everybody's telling your boss and actually give them some facts to back up why your work matters and how to both combat some of those talking points that they're giving you, but also some ways to make your work relate to some of these people's buzzwords. So that's more what this is. So let's start firstly with not my clicker working. All right, let's get to know each other. I gave a kind of similar version of this talk at API Days in London last week, and I'm really curious to see the split of the room this time. So raise your hand if you're a developer. Okay. And raise your hand if you're like a business technologist, product manager, product marketer. Yeah, DevRel maybe, if you're not a coder. Yeah, maybe. So interesting split. So more like a 80-20 this time around. Last week it was 50-50. So APIs, it makes sense, right? Business technologists are using APIs to sort of extend the value of their software in more accessible ways. You folks are here to use your tools of choice. So I think that's really interesting, and I want to make sure that I'm covering this topic in a way that makes sense to you. But why the hell should you listen to me? Okay, so I used to work at Armory. Armory is a continuous deployment software solution. I used to work at Stoplight. Stoplight is a design and documentation software. They also do Stoplight Studio, open source. They were just acquired by SmartBear, so rest in peace. And now I work at Opsera, and Opsera is a unified DevOps platform that also includes release orchestration. So I kind of have been around, and so the things that I have been around, I'll tell you about today. But the things I care about are people, processes, and technology. And your boss probably cares about that middle. And you probably care about the right. But I feel like we all should care about the people. And so that's what this talk is going to help you contextualize some of their challenges that they have with some of the stuff that you're working on. But first, let's establish a baseline. And now you get to groan, because we're going to talk about Dora. Now's the groaning part. I added this little link here because it's very funny. So if you ever have a chance to do this, do it. It'll make you laugh, because it's really just like a self-assessment of how well your team is doing. And it's like, can you deploy multiple times per month? Oh my gosh, is that the bar? That's what's really funny to me, is that's the bar right now. And so, if you're taking this and you're deploying multiple times per month, you could do better, is what Dora is saying. So this is what your bosses are hearing about every single day, right? This is your CTO, this is your, if you have the pleasure of having a chief digital officer, that's what they're learning about. And they're bringing it back to the development teams to increase velocity and increase stability. Why? Because that's going to accelerate your software delivery. So we're going to measure lead time for changes, how long it's going to take us to get a code to production. And we're going to measure deployment frequency because we want to know how often you guys are deploying. And we're going to know what the change failure rate, because we want to know how long it takes you. That's what it's very much about, the work you're doing. We want to measure it, change failure rate, to know how long it's going to take to restore service. Are you failing a lot? And is it taking a long time to recover? And for me, I think these are important. Don't get me wrong. Like Jeremy's talk, very important metrics, right? These are things that contribute to how well your software is doing, how well your teams are doing, but it's not the end-all be-all. And so I'm here to bring another slide to your boss, is outcome-based. So if your boss is like, I want you to give me metrics on all of these. I want you to give me a dashboard that shows me your lead time for changes every single day, right? You could say, sure, boss. Now give me this also, because I want to see, are our customers satisfied? If I'm busting my butt to put out all these changes as fast as I can to increase velocity, what do our customers even say about it? Right? Are they satisfied? Do they like the work that I'm doing? Here's some metrics that can help me in my job. Right? These are just examples, but say, hey, I need more transparency into, are our customers even enjoying and engaging with the deployments that we're busting our butts to do? Secondly, what about me? What's in it for me? Right? I'm busting my butt to really bring down that change failure rate. Man, I'm deploying securely, I'm deploying continuously, I'm pressing commit and then following all this tool chain, blah, 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 blah. I am burnt out. And I'm not the only one, and I want to know what my colleague feels like. And I want to know what the other team feels like that I work with. And I want to know what the customers see when they engage with us as a team, right? And so here's some examples of outcomes you could measure. Glassdoor is a really good one. Anybody ever use Glassdoor? That's a good one for some anonymized data about how your company's feeling. Are your developers feeling that pain of trying to do these DORA things faster and faster and faster without even an expectation of understanding how it's impacting the business? And third, what do we get out of it? So not just what do I get out of it, what do my customers get out of it, what do we get out of it as a business? So if we're doing this work, are we actually creating more opportunity for revenue and investment, or is this vanity, right? Are these vanity metrics for ourselves to say, oh yeah, we improved our change failure rate by 0.5%. Okay, am I making more money from this? Am I gonna have a job next year, right? I think that's a really big thing for us all to push for, to relate these outcomes back to the work we're doing. So pipeline is not the pipeline you're thinking of. Pipeline is revenue pipeline, right? Tell me, if I make this change that is so important to this business, how is it going to contribute to the sales that we hope to make? Is it bringing more investment opportunities, right? If we're really high velocity, really high stability, am I going to get a Series B funding? And partnerships. If we're showing how cool we're doing, is it going to provide more opportunities to partner with other people doing other cool things? So I think this slide is probably your number one takeaway from this talk, is like, hey, yeah, I can create the best, most stable, highest velocity, most secure pipeline in the entire galaxy. tell me what the business sees from this work that I'm doing, because I want to know that we can all work together to make these outcomes happen. All right, so now, cool. How do we do this? So people, process, and technology is my mantra here. And so you're going to see some key capabilities. These are a blend of key capabilities driven from the DORA assessment team themselves, from the Accelerate State of Software report, key capabilities that you'll see commonly, but also blended with a more humanistic approach. So those outcomes we were talking about earlier that very much depend on humans, you'll see those reflected here as well. So foster a culture of continuous improvement. So I think that's important for your teams, right? Is, hey, if we want to crush DORA metrics, not just to do it, not just to crush DORA metrics and show my boss that I can, but to do it because we want to show improvement meaningfully. And our teams care about that. Focus on team outcomes, not developer productivity. So I don't know how many of you folks have been on LinkedIn for the past couple weeks, but McKinsey's in some hot water, I would say, for publishing a really tone-deaf article about developer productivity. If you haven't read it, do yourself a favor and read it just so you know. You got to know your opposition, know your enemy. Isn't that one of the top tenets of war? Know your enemy. These highly paid, huge top 5 firms are giving advice based on your individual productivity. But your individual productivity does not a business outcome make, right? So you need to be able to focus on your teams. What's your charter, right? What are you here to do? And then you'll be able to show how productive your team actually is, because your individuality is important to you, but it's not important to the business. So this other one here, I have a slide that I'm really excited about to show you. Empower developers' tools of choice, because right now in this economic uncertainty, this time we're all hearing do more with less, or whatever your buzzwords you're hearing, people are cutting down on tools. They're chopping tools, right? This is inefficient. This is inefficient. We're at the open source summit. Y'all are using the tools you want to use, right? We need to advocate for that. It's not a cost center, and I'll show you a slide why it's not a cost center, why it's actually important for you to do your jobs. And then high collaboration and communication. So teams with high collaboration and communication are shown to be more productive and effective. That's it. You put a status on your Slack that said, I'm doing this, this, and this today. I accomplished this, this, and this yesterday. That counts as high collaboration. The bar is very low, people. I'm not kidding. When I said the bar was at the floor, it is. That counts as high collaboration and communication. So here's that slide. When teams decide which tools they use, it contributes to software delivery performance and in turn to organizational performance. High-performing teams and high-performing organizations enable tool of choice. Not make slashes and cuts wherever possible in the name of efficiency. That is a myth. It doesn't help. In fact, it does the opposite of help. So I love this slide because I'm very much, we need to support our tools of choice. All right, I'm going to wait for him to take a picture because I want him to do that. Thank you. All right. Okay, processes. We did people, now processes. What key capabilities do you need to be high performing? Continuous integration and continuous delivery. That's why we're here. Need I say more? That constitutes high performing. Automation and infrastructure as code. Great. We just had a really great infrastructure as code for secure supply chain talk. Hope you guys all listened because it was really great. Integrated testing and security. Again, this is another one that harkens back to Tecton. That talk was really great about integrating your testing through every part of the tool chain. Jeremy also mentioned this. It's really, really important. And a culture of immediate feedback. So not just feedback from customers, feedback from each other, feedback from the business, right? The longer it takes you to process feedback, the less impactful your changes will be. You need to be able to do this quickly and as high velocity to get feedback as they expect you to be quickly pushing changes to production. Teams that reported, oh, this one's really funny. This makes me laugh a lot. Teams that reported no approval process or used peer review only achieved higher software delivery performance than teams that required approval by an external body. They achieved lower performance. Okay, this one makes me laugh a lot because you're going to hear, oh, we need an approval board, oh, we need, you can't get this change to production until 8 people have seen it and signed off on it, right? It's going to increase our stability and our code quality. That's false. That will not do that. In fact, it will slow you way down. So what do you do instead? Lightweight change approval process based on automation, peer review, very quick, easy, integrated with your workflow, okay? Don't waste time battling with the people who are going to keep your code from production. Advocate for yourselves to give each other the peer review process that you deserve. Technology, great. Automated continuous deployment and release orchestration. So you saw a little graph in Jeremy's talk. The difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment is very much just the difference between a check mark and an automation, right? Is a person standing there giving an approval, or is your code quality enough to automatically get deployed to production? So teams who are able to do that are high performing. Unified insights. So I just said tool of choice is the most important thing for all of you to have good outcomes, not burn out, feel like you're contributing in the way that you need to be able to. But the business is going to say, I have no visibility into all these damn tools that you're all using. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how you're using them. I don't know how they're improving the business at all. There are now tools in place across the market that allow you to plug into your tool of choice ecosystem and display DORA metrics, as well as other outcomes across your tools. I won't say which one might be a good choice for you that I now work at, but I'll just mention that. And then platform engineering management and tool chains, like an idea of platform management, right? Platform engineering. Your teams matter, their velocity matters, but be thinking a little bit wider, right? Help your teams see wider than your individual mandate every single day. How does this contribute to the business? How does this contribute to our platform at large? Doesn't mean you have to be a platform engineer. It just means you have to have that in your brain when your teams are pushing to production. And then treat APIs as products, not just technology. So I just came from API days, and that's one of the major themes of that entire program is I could make an API of this, or this API could be the way we extend the value of the software that we're creating, and it should be treated as a first-class citizen and part of our platform engineering program. Okay, here's another little quick slide that shows you the difference between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. It's just an easy one, basic. High-performing teams can deploy to production on demand throughout the software delivery lifecycle. So if you can hit commit and you can deploy to production without anybody standing in your way, you're considered a high performer. The bar is very low. All right, so I want to give you a quick case study about how all of this works in practice and how these both delivery-based measurements and outcomes-based measurements have joined to help this one particular company. So Tesoro is a stealth fintech company building the plane as they're trying to fly it. They have about 50 developers. They have a lot riding on their launch, right? This is fintech, so what they're trying to do is enable huge velocity of payment at scale, microtransactional payments at scale across the world. Huge, huge, right? That's difficult to put into perspective, but what are they trying to do? They are able to get their lead time for changes down to 8 minutes with 50 developers building the plane as they're flying it. So this is their baseline. This is their benchmark. They say, we can't go over 8 minutes. Their change failure rate is 4.5%. Their deployment frequency is 4 deployments per day on average, which is not the worst, right? I know people who are deploying 10 times per day, 20 times per day. 4 deployments per day is pretty good. And you know what that allows them to be, according to DORA metrics? High performing, right? Bar's pretty low. But it's great. It shows that if they can average around 4 deployments per day, you know, every few hours they're pushing a deployment, team's feeling good, it's continuous, they don't have to worry about whether the deployment will go through or not, it's been tested, it's stable, and then they can go home. They have an 8-hour workday. And their mean time to recovery is under 2 minutes. So they built from the ground up a continuous deployment culture to help them smash these metrics so that when they come out of stealth and they're processing hundreds of thousands of dollars of transactions per minute, they're not seeing downtimes at all. That's their goal. Their goal is like, if I have more than 2 minutes of downtime, I'm costing my company $200,000. So that's their goal. And it seems to be working. They're considered high performing, internal and external NPS scores. These developers are happy. They're excited. This launch is about to gain a lot of attention. I'm really excited that this is like the blueprint for how they want their business to operate. And so I hope when they come out of stealth that it is a success, because this really shows how all these things can work together and create a culture where people are excited to work there and enabled to work there. So here's another case study. It's quick about your developer tool of choice, right? I'm an advocate for that. I think we're all advocates for that in this room. If we're here at the Open Source Summit, we all want to use the tools we want to use. It absolutely leads to more collaboration, better satisfaction, and agility. This is a nonprofit healthcare. I'm not allowed to say what, but let's just say it's a good one. And then they were able to create a pipeline in 30 minutes versus 2 hours. So if you're at all familiar with the healthcare industry, you may have seen previously how sometimes building a pipeline can take a day. I don't know if anybody's ever encountered that from a healthcare provider. This one was doing relatively well at 2.5 hours, but they cut it down to 30 minutes. So for them, that made them a lot more satisfied with their jobs, because they perceived in their own employee surveys an 80% increase in productivity. Perception is reality. If your boss perceives an 80% improvement in productivity and you perceive an 80% improvement in productivity, guess what? Y'all are more productive, right? That's all that matters. Being able to show, yes, we've done this, we've cut down on these times, we're able to push to deployment quickly, easy, high velocity, high stability, and we feel better about it. And so do you. Here's a little quick snippet of the landscape, the core model for DORA. Highly recommend you check out the full report. They're about to publish a new one for 2023. I think it comes out in October. I'm very curious to see what exciting new things they say. So what's next? I think we all should bring back some of these things to our teams and talk about what makes me feel satisfied, what makes me feel challenged, and help our organizational leaders understand that measuring metrics is important, but measuring outcomes matters to you, and you want more visibility and transparency into what those outcomes are. People, processes, and technology. So if you walked away from this I hope that's what you think of when you think of DORA metrics. Here's some ways you can identify where you are or aren't succeeding. Can you deliver quickly, collaboratively, reliably, securely, continuously? And for your business, it depends. So everybody's going to say it depends. What does quickly mean to you? What does collaboratively mean to you? Establishing a baseline is going to be your best bet to be able to show a change. So start with your teams. And this is my favorite watch. Yeah, your teams are going to give you the best way to establish that baseline. So, do you feel like you can use the tools you want to use? Right? Do you get to see the impact of your work? And do you get to engage in your code all the way from commit to production? And I don't mean watch it get rejected by somebody. That's not what I mean. I mean, can you see your code go from commit through a testing environment, through a deployment, and give you the green light at the end of it? And if you can't, if you have no idea what that black box looks like, it's time to start advocating for that change. Because that's how you become a high-performing team. So some suggested reading, like I said, the State of DevOps Report 2022 is a good one. 2023 is right around the corner. Value Stream Management, this is from Opsera, where I work now. Really good little piece published this year. And then The Ultimate Guide to Continuous Deployment, I wrote this, so if you want to check that out, definitely give that one a look. And then, yeah, Accelerate, which is a book published in 2017. Hopefully they come out with a new version soon, because it's a really great book and y'all should read it. And that's me. And then this, if you noticed the artwork and you thought it was cute as heck, this is from Yasa Design, and she is fantastic, and I highly recommend her work because it'll add a little bit of spice to otherwise really annoying corporate visual artwork that you usually see in these things. All right, thanks y'all, I appreciate it. Let your bosses know.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was great. And definitely Accelerate is a great book, one of the best books I've read in the last couple of years. And
Totally.
I'm not a huge workbook. I'm a reader, but not a workbook. When someone says, hey, read this tech book, I'm like, really? Some of them can be quite dry, but Accelerate is a really, really good book, so definitely. So we're going to take a break now, grab some coffees or, walk around a bit, and we'll come back and kick off with the next session at 11. So we've got 2 more sessions, and then a Q&A panel, which will take us up to the end of the mini summit. Thank you very much.
How are you doing? No, I think you're doing great. Yeah. Why is it not showing up now? Yeah, no, and they've all been really good. Like so kudos to the conference committee. Why is it not showing up? It was just a second ago.
Oh, maybe something timed out at their laptop or something, perhaps.
Oh, okay. Go get your coffee. There's plenty of time.
Okay, welcome back everybody. Hopefully you got the coffee before it ran out, which happened very quickly, but hopefully you managed to procure a coffee somewhere else from one of the other rooms. Next up we're going to hear from Laurie LaRusso, and she's the open source program manager at JFrog. And this is a definitely topic close to my heart. Establishing an open source project is great, it's the first step, but really what happens after that is the challenge: adoption, engagement, getting traction. So Laurie's going to tell us how to make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you.
A warm welcome for Laurie, please. Thank you.
All right. Ooh, this is weird. Okay. I don't know. All right, so good day, everyone. My name is Laurie. I am the open source program manager at JFrog. I have sort of a history of posting pictures of me and my kid on my intro to myself slide. So she discovered Snapchat filters when we were on a train on our way through Switzerland. So yeah, that's her. So if you ever want to travel with a 7-year-old, you know, phones and filters are the way to go because they stay completely entertained and people around you just happen to laugh as well. Okay, so please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I am the Outreach Marketing Committee Chair for the CDF. I am also the Marketing Chair for the CNCF. I was a part of OpenSSF's OpenSSF Days Program Committee, so I'm kind of Miss Foundation. So if you have questions about foundations and things like that, you please feel free to talk to me. I probably don't have the answers you're looking for, but I can find somebody that will. All right, so the name of this talk was we have an open source project, now what? Well, first we have to start with an open source project, so let's create one. So all of us here in this room work for our company, and it's called the CD Mini Summit. That is our company. We are all happy to be a part of this company. But we've got a problem, and we've named our problem Waldo. And so what is Waldo? So Waldo is, he's the worst. So we inherited a code base that was clunky, right? It's a total, excuse my language, but it's a total time suck, right? It's a morale killer. It's a money pit. There's so many security threats. Basically, whenever we want to get something done, we realize we can't because there's something mucking it up along the way. So what do? We find a solution. So we all get together and we talk about it and we figure what do we want? Well, we collaborate. We realize that we want an automated process. We want to set some parameters to identify things that are unnecessary in our code base. And then we want to figure out how to get rid of them, right? Like, is this actually causing issues? Can it just stay there and we can move on? Like, there's so much of it. Like, what do we do? What's more important? And then we want notifications, and we want them where we work, right? So that we don't have to like keep going back in and spending more time. Yeah, I'm looking at you guys. So what do we create? We create Project Waldon't, because we don't want Waldo anymore. We don't want to find this code anymore, and we don't want to have to deal with it. So what is Waldon't? It's an AI-powered bot that analyzes your code base. It scans your code for classes and variables you aren't using. It creates a pull request with recommendations, and then you're notified via Slack, right? Because that's where you're at all day. So if this sounds like an actual project, that's probably because, again, I live in foundations and I might have just like grabbed a couple of things and put it all together. Does this actually exist? No. I don't know. No. Okay. So we have our project. Now what? Now we realize that we are probably not the only company that is struggling with these types of issues. So we want to share what we've done with the broader community. And we know, like, okay, we have to create a community outside of our own company, but how do we do that? Well, we're going to need users and contributors, and then we're going to win. So we need to submit to conference talks. We need to write blog posts. We need to get social. We need to podcast. We need to Twitch it up. We need to YouTube. We need to do all of these things, and this is a lot of work. And we actually created Waldon't to alleviate some of our workload, and now we've just created a ton more. So what should we do? Well, we should propose Waldon't to a foundation and ask the community to help us move this forward. So here are some popular Linux Foundation projects you might have heard of: the CNCF, OpenSSF, All of these other ones, CDF's not on here. It's literally just a screen grab. Foundation alignment. What is the size of the foundation? How many projects do they currently have? What does the membership look like? Am I going to be able to get some end users out of this, some contributors? What are the actual proposal and proposal and graduation requirements, right? Because we want to get in, but we also want to get out, right? We want our project to be successful so that it can kind of stand alone. And most importantly, and we'll talk a lot about this today, are like, what are the benefits of being in the foundation? And when you find one that works, you're going to be that little guy on that chair and just having a great old time, happy with everything. So project to project alignment. I don't know if y'all have seen the movie Twins. I might be aging myself, but these are actually identical Siamese twins, Arnold and Danny DeVito there. But if you notice, they're aligned. They're wearing the same thing. They got the same jacket pull, same glasses. They look amazing. So you need to look at your foundation's mission. What is their vision? What are they trying to achieve, right? So the CDF, while we're all here, it's an open source community to improve the world's ability to deliver software with security and speed. You know, is our project in that house? I don't know. CNCF, it's to make cloud native computing ubiquitous. OpenSSF, it's all about security. OSS Open, it's standardizations, right? So this is just a very high level of 4. I showed you a list that had a lot more, but again, if you want to make sure that your project is in the right place, project to foundation or project to project alignment is very critical. Now, what is the size of the project or the foundation? And I'm using project/foundation because everybody calls themselves something different, and words are important, and I don't want to leave anybody out. So first, how many projects are currently hosted? Do y'all know how many projects are at the CNCF? Raise your hands. Guess. Anyone? No. No, 172. So yeah, y'all are very close, but that's a ton of projects, right? So when you look at this graph here, and it says projects that were accepted into the CNCF, and you look at their stages, yellow is incubating, blue or teal, whatever, is sandbox, and purple is graduated, which I feel like purple is missing because I know that some projects have graduated specifically last year and this year. So I will let them know to update this graphic. You can see there's a ton. And there's a ton that are in that sandbox phase. And, you know, that's early adopters. That's like really just starting. Like you're just getting innovative. Like these are the projects that are either going to win or they might just fail, right? But the whole point is they were submitted to the CNCF because they have this idea and they want to innovate and they need the CNCF to help them win. Okay. And then again, we're talking about the stages. Like what stages are they in? The other thing that's very crucial that y'all should think about is what is the membership base, right? Like our project is backed by a company, the CD Mini Summit. That's great, but like what if you just made this project up on your own, right? What if you were just tooling around one day and you built a project and you're like, this is awesome. Like a friend of mine, Andres Amare, he's got a project called JReleaser, right? And he's just doing it on his own. But, you know, does he have end users? Yeah. But does he have money backing him up? No. So is this a project that can be sustained? Well, yeah, as long as he wants to, he can sustain it. But when you think about proposing your project to a foundation, look at the member base because these people might want to use your project. And what does that mean? Oh, they might want to help fund your project. They might want to assign staff developers to work solely on your project because they had no idea how big the problem that they had until you highlighted it that could maybe solve it. They're like, yes, let's do this. So that's always really important. So there's always a list of contributors on all of the websites for all of the projects or foundation pages that you look at. Check that out. See like who's doing what, and you know, keep that in mind. This is huge, y'all. The graduation and the proposal requirements. I mean, Andrea is on the TOC of the CDF. He can back me up here saying that this is not like the easiest stuff to go through, right? Proposal processes take time. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon, right? You have to get all your ducks in a row. So the due diligence that you do in terms of finding a foundation that might be the right home for you, don't just find one. Find 1, 2, 3, or 4, right? That all kind of work within where you're at because you might not get accepted to the first one, or you might not be able to create or finish out some of their requirements, like, because you're just not there yet. So again, due diligence is super important. And the other thing you need to think about is when you propose your project is, what does graduation look like, right? So as someone that is maintaining a project, the end goal is to graduate, you would think, right? Is to be able to be a standalone, fully functioning, out there in the world. So when you're looking at what it takes to get in, also look at what it takes to get out, because you should be mapping that out in your like overall plan of action, like what you want this project to do. If you're not looking at the end goal, how are you ever going to get there, right? So getting in is the first step, but getting out is also something that you should think about. All right, so most important, I think, here are the benefits, right? So we've talked about like looking at who's where, who's their members, all this other stuff, but like, where's the juice for me? Like, I gave you a list of things that you need to do to be able to be successful in getting your project out in the community. And we all agree that we just don't have the time to do every single thing on that step. So what is the foundation gonna do for me? All right, because if I go with them, how are they gonna help me get to where I wanna be? So the first thing is reputation management. Okay, what does that mean? We are now a CDF-backed project. So that means that we went through that entire crazy list of proposal requirements. We met with the TOC, we got sponsorship, we got this, we got that, and we got in. So now anybody that knows about our project knows that it's backed by a bunch of technologists that believe in it and want to see it succeed. So that's huge. Right there, that gets you like through the front door with a lot of companies, with a lot of ideas of contributors and maintainers and things like that, because they know that you have a group of people behind you already that support you. Program management. How many times have y'all been on Zoom calls? And you're like, I would like this project to have its own Zoom account because there's a ton of us and we all can't just keep logging into one individual account. We need to have a basis. We need to be able to look at the meeting notes. We need to get those meeting notes put up somewhere. We need to have this, we need to have that. Does the foundation, what kind of program management do they offer you? That's really important because you can't do it all. That is why you want to donate your project. Legal services. Are they going to trademark things for you? Are they going to have counsel that you can ask if maybe you didn't realize you crossed a line somewhere that shouldn't have been crossed? You know, are they going to go to bat for you when it comes to, like, I don't know, filing taxes or this, that, and the other? I don't know. Legal services are a thing, and you don't want to, like, I'm American, so we all know that we know legal services are a thing. What do? We sue first? I don't know. So, so just be sure that you take that, like, that they're going to offer that to you. Here's another thing, like, projects are pricey, right? Like, it costs a lot of money. I work for JFrog. We sponsor Artifactory accounts for Jenkins. We sponsor it for Adoptium. We sponsor it for a ton of big open source projects. And one of the things I've been working with lately is trying to get the cost down, because when you don't have oversight, people just keep adding stuff up, right? And like, we have multiple mirrors of this and that and the other. So that's a huge expense that, because JFrog supports open source, they're like, we are willing to take that on. We want you to use our project, our tool, so we will do that for you. But what other tools does the foundation come with that can help you to move your project forward? Do they have deals with cloud credits? Does anybody know about cloud credits? They're so cheap. What are the tools that they're going to give you to move your project forward? These are all things that you should think about. Then, does the foundation or project, again, have certifications and trainings? Can they support you while you grow your project by making your maintainers, give them opportunities to learn more, giving them opportunities to upskill? Can you maybe create a training or a certification to help get your project more noticed in the community? Like, again, these are things that you might not have thought of when you were just creating Waldon't, because you just didn't want to like look at just all this bad code. But these are things that you should take into account if you're going to submit to a foundation. And because I am a marketing person, I have it in green. Now we're going to talk about some of the ways that foundations really can help you market your project and get it out there. Oh, John Oliver, he's so cute. Okay, so marketing. here's just some examples of ways that the foundation you work with can help you market your project. So I am very happy to be a co-host of the CD pipeline for the CDF. And what is it? It is a monthly online show. We partnered with TechStrong TV. Again, the CDF has a partnership with TechStrong TV to bring up topics each month and then bring projects on and maintainers on and people in the community to help talk about what they're doing and how they're advancing certain things, right? So the first one I think that we did was with Jenkins, because we wanted to do the history of CD and all that good stuff, which was really cool. The other thing, are they templates? So the CNCF is now creating these new project collaterals. They're one-pagers that help you really go to a conference or create a web page that is very succinct and detailed information about your project and where to find more information. How many times have you tried to describe something and you're all over the map? Okay, so what did the CNCF do for their projects? They created a very clear-cut, easy-to-follow template so that you can now have a very nice, cleanly designed piece of marketing collateral that you can bring with you when you go to a meetup, when you go to a conference, and it's super easy to edit and manipulate. And if you're not a marketing person, you're just I'm just a developer, not just a developer, but these are things that that the CNCF is doing to help their project move forward. Another thing is blogging. Right? So they help promote blogs that you're writing. How many times have you looked at your Google Analytics and realized that your blog received 5 views? It's awesome. Yeah, so why not bank on the reputation of the CDF, the CNCF, the OpenSSF, whatever other foundation to push your material forward to a larger, broader audience? Maybe you're talking about your latest version release and why that's important. Maybe you're trying to get thought leadership and you want to talk about something that you find very critical, and then you link back to your blog post that has the technical stuff, right? So you're going high, and then you're getting granular into the weeds. So again, these are huge benefits that you might not think are there or might not know about, but you should totally take advantage of them. Due diligence, y'all. I can't tell you how many meetings that I've been on in all of the foundations that I work with that they're we need blog material. Does anybody have a blog post that we can push out? And I'm this is insane. This is insane. Little things that you think are happening with your project, like a version control or release, a bug fix or whatever, can turn into so much more and get you more attention if you use the foundation for what it's for, which is to help market, get maintainers, get contributors, all of these things. So I urge anybody in here in this room, if you're a part of a project or whatever, and you're yeah, we could use some more love-in, talk to the foundation that you're with. It's usually blog@foundation, send the email, and then they'll work with you, they'll edit it, they'll make it look pretty, and they'll get it out there, and they'll push it out to their channels, which hopefully will then grow your channels. So community building, yeah, this is my personal Slack. As you can see, I am a part of lots and lots of channels. So we've got the CDF, CNCF, FUJE, OpenSSF, CPP+, OASIS, OWASP, Grails, Docker, Adoptium. List goes on and on and on, right? So the bigger the project, they usually have their own space. But within projects, within the CDF, we have our projects have their own channels, which is great because then you're a part of the community. But this is where community building and where a foundation can really help you grow, is by creating these areas for people to network and to talk and to ask questions. Then you're going to get more people talking to each other, more people doing pull requests, this, that, and the other, and just really get engagement. This we're in the virtual era, right? It's beautiful to be here with all of you in person. I've been working from home since 2017. These are my opportunities to see people in the flesh, but how much more do we get accomplished when we work online and async, right? When is your next meeting? When is this? When is that? Again, you wrote a blog post. Where does it make the most sense? Let's blast it out in our community, in the general channel. Hey, have you guys been interested in this, that, and the other? So while you might think, oh, another Slack channel, there's reasons why there's so many. is because it's important and it keeps your communities engaged and together. And I'm just using Slack. You can use Discord, you can use Twitch, whatever works the best for you. And again, as the project, you make that decision and that's what you go with to the foundation. I'm pretty sure that's probably in one of those proposal requirements, like how are you communicating? Like, are you? Oh, there's an ant. That's interesting. That was weird. Okay, and so what else foundations can do for you? Ambassadors. So what was like one of the first things I said that we need to do, right? We need to go to talks and conferences and meetups and present and blog and all of these things. Again, that's a lot of work. But you can have ambassadors, whether it's ambassadors within the foundation itself, like CEF has an ambassador program, other foundations have ambassador programs, or if it's your own project ambassador programs, right? Docker captains, Oracle aces, Java champions, right? These are people that have been identified as leaders in their industry or in their tool that they're using, and then the project is going to support them by pushing them forward. Well, does the foundation that you're trying to submit your project to also have a similar program? And do you want to nominate somebody to be an ambassador, not just for that foundation, but obviously for the project that you're working on within that foundation, right? So then you have like this line to this bigger community, this broader community. And then when we talk about financial benefits, right? Like, does the foundation have travel support? I can't pay for something. Is there an opportunity for me to submit somebody for a scholarship application? Does the foundation have scholarships where they can like help get somebody to the next step in their career? Like, has a project, how can we help the next generation or the current generation of developers get their skills up or be able to expound on what we do to the broader community? Like, again, these are things that you should think about when submitting your project to a foundation, right? Putting a project in a foundation doesn't mean you're done, right? You wipe your hands of it. It's the more you do within, in the foundation, the more they'll do for you, right? So how many times have I been on a call where they're like, is anybody using their membership benefits? When's the last time, you have 10 certifications a year that you can give to your company. Like, are you doing that? Is anybody doing that? Like, these are things, again, that like as a project, what are they going to give to my maintainers and contributors? As a project, do we get certifications? Like, can we send somebody to the new like training online? Will they get a certificate? Will they get that cool Credly badge that says that they did something really cool on our behalf and they learned some new skill set? Like, can I help them use this then to become an ambassador? So these are things. So I have no idea how long I've been talking, and I do apologize if I've gone long or short, but propose your project today. Don't hoard what you're doing. Share it with the community, right? Like, if it's an open source, like, that's what we're here for, right? Is to encourage and to, share our knowledge. I mean, Natale did a great example of a complete open source pipeline that is going to secure your software. Like, all open source. That's amazing. Where are those projects housed? CNCF for most of them. Like, that's cool. And OpenSSF, right? So like, they are getting support of a foundation. You should as well. And yeah, so thank you, and follow me.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Laurie. It was great.
Thank you.
Definitely a lot of things resonate for me there, for sure. Another takeaway from this morning so far is I really need to up my slide game. We've seen Monty Python, Twins reference, definitely great for hooking people in and keeping attention there, so fantastic. So next up we're going to hear from Ole Lensmar, who's CTO at TestCube, and Ole's going to talk about the importance of testing in the software delivery lifecycle and tell us about certain tools that can be used in CI/CD pipelines. Specifically, as I mentioned in the intro, CD events is really valuable, so I think Ole's going to reference that too. So thank you, Ole.
Sure, thanks. La-di-da. Okay, thanks so much. Great to be here. I am Ole Lensmar, CTO at TestCube, as we heard. Thank you so much. Been in this space for a long time. If you're familiar with OpenAPI, I was the chairman of the OAI OpenAPI initiative, worked at SmartBear and other companies in the API space. TestCube is an open source project, which is TestCube is also a member of the CDF, but the project itself has not been donated yet, something that we should talk about. Lori, perhaps? This is probably the most technical talk you're gonna hear today, so for the developers here, this is gonna be very hard on, and it's also gonna be very, the slide design is very Nordic. I'm from Stockholm, so it's very minimalistic, IKEA, not a lot of memes or colors. There's some purple here. Okay, so let's just start with CD events. Also, I want to just say, we've heard 3 talks now, I think, saying how important testing is. So I think that's great to hear. I think everyone kind of agrees with that, but we've also seen a lot of changes in testing and testing practices, and that's what we're trying to address here. Just as a quick recap, CD events was born out of the need realization that different CI and CD tools and platforms need to communicate. As we're building out more and more complex pipelines, we want those to be kind of we want them to be loosely coupled, and that would preferably be through an eventing architecture. And the CD events protocol was one of the projects then that was created. Andrea, who's sitting here, is the lead for that. So if you have any technical questions about CD events specifically, he can answer all of those. It's built on top of Cloud Events. Which in itself is another project and a pretty established standard. So this is something that's kind of well rooted in the space, and it has it's incubated in the CDF website. There's a website you can go to. The CDF defines events for a bunch of things. This is just from the website itself. So there's events related to source control, there's events related to continuous integration, there's events related to testing, which is what I'm going to talk about, continuous deployment and continuous operations and cloud events binding, etc. So it covers a rather broad area within CI/CD, but I'm going to be focusing on specifically on testing. And this is something, obviously TestCube, the project I'm from, is about testing, which you can probably guess by the name, something that we've very enthusiastic about, and when we discovered the CD event spec, we kind of quickly realized there's maybe a need to extract what was at that point a very small support for testing within I think it was the continuous integration events. There was a couple of subjects and predicates. So why did we think that there's a need for new events specifically for testing? Well, I think as we've already heard a couple of times today in a distributed architecture, tests are now run not just as part of your build jobs in Jenkins or GitHub, but often run asynchronously. They can be run manually. They can be run as a response to events happening in your clusters or from your incident management. There's people doing testing production. We have people who don't even run tests as part of their CI/CD pipelines because they take too long, and instead they schedule their tests to run every 30 minutes and use that as a way to quality gate their systems. So people are not running tests maybe as strictly as they were 10, 15 years ago. And so to kind of cater to that and to all those use cases and the decoupling of testing from your traditional static build jobs, it felt to us that the need for events related to testing was kind of pretty obvious. So what we did then was we defined a couple of events, and as I said already, these replaced the previously defined test suite and test case subjects that were in the continuous integration category. All the documentation and the JSON schemas and the examples, they're all on the repo on GitHub, so it's all there, and this was released as version 0.1.0 as part of 0.3.0 CD events. I guess this was in June something, I don't remember, earlier this year at least. Okay, let's just dive. This is going to be very techy and lots of monospaced fonts, which means code. So what we've basically done is we've defined 3 subjects. A test case run, which models the execution of a test, a test suite run, which models the execution of a test suite, and a test output, which models an output from a test case run specifically. So important to note here that we're not modeling the test case itself or the test suite itself. It's about the actual execution, and we heard similar earlier today about pipeline runs and task runs, etc. So these are defined as separate subjects, and then for each of these we've defined predicates, queued, started, finished for the first 2, and then a published. And I'm going to walk you just through what that looks like, and I'm going to show an example at the end, of course. So test case run, and if you look at the seed event spec, it defines a couple of common fields that all objects have, or all subjects. So, and some of those are inherited from there. But specifically, the last three here, for each test case run, there's an environment, so you know which environment it's running in. You can provide a test case that is kind of an abstract reference to a test case somewhere, and this is very abstract. The test case could be a JUnit test, it could be a Postman collection, it could be a Cypress test, it could be whatever testing tool you're using. And a test case run can also be related to a test suite run, and this is when it comes to more complex orchestration of tests, which we're seeing more in integration test scenarios where you might, as part of an integration test, run both API tests, UI tests, security tests, load tests, either at the same time or in parallel, just to kind of see how everything works out. And then you orchestrate all of those into a test suite run. And maybe a little bit complex, but that's how things usually end up if you're doing this kind of thing anyway. So just looking at the queued predicate for test case run. So this is an event that would be emitted when a test case is being scheduled to run. It hasn't actually run. And it might be waiting for some applicable constraints to come into place, right? It could be resource availability. It might be waiting for something else to finish. It might be, waiting for something else to pass, or maybe not fail, well, maybe, but something to be fulfilled before executing. So, for example, Jenkins could potentially emit a test case run queued event when it's starting a build job where it knows that it has a test case or a test step later on in its build, right? But it hasn't actually run the test. So on this receiving side, at least you'd be knowing, okay, this might be coming up. This is not a required event. So these are many of these events, and we'll get back to the heuristics about which events would you actually expect. And you'll see that a trigger object is also commonly used here, because you might want to know, how is this actually being triggered? Is it a manual trigger? Somebody might clicking run this test button, and you might in the end want to ignore manually triggered tests. Maybe you're only interested in tests that are triggered by a pipeline in Jenkins or some other mechanism. So trying to give some alternatives on how to handle these events. Test case run started, not surprisingly, is emitted when the actual test case starts. Once again, you'll have to know which environment it's running in, which test case it's related to, which test suite run it might be related to, and what triggered it. And the queued event that I mentioned earlier is not mandatory, so many times you'll just get this event emitted from your system, and you probably won't get a queued event. And the only thing that's actually mandatory here is the ID and the environment. So all of these others are optional, just to kind of give the receiver more context. Test case could definitely be interesting, because you might want to aggregate all test case runs for a specific test case over time. You might want to track, how is this test case performed over time when it comes to status, pass fail, et cetera, et cetera. And not surprisingly, there's a finished event at the end, which then adds, once again, the ID, so you can kind of go back to which test case run you're talking about, which environment, and then the outcome of that test, if it pass, fail, cancel, error. And we have a pull request now for adding a skip alternative here. As always, small things can result in big debates, so it hasn't been approved yet. So you can go to the GitHub issue and weigh in. We've also added severity, and this is obviously, or not obviously, but this is a little bit of a stretch, because severity is subjective. If a test fails in one context, it might be really bad, but if it fails, so if your load test doesn't pass in production, that's really bad, but if it doesn't pass in testing, that's maybe not so bad, because that's a constrained resource. So severity is something that is not mandatory, and reason is just a string that gives you more context on the receiving side. Once again, the only thing that's required here is the outcome, pass-fail stadio, because that's at least the least thing we thought would be helpful. Now we're coming to test suites and test suite runs. Once again, not surprisingly, test suite run models the execution of a test suite, and it also has reference to the environment that it's running in. So once again, staging, production, whatever, and a reference to a test suite object that could be defined in an external system. And here we have the similar queued, I'm not going to read these tables to you or at you, it's the same kind of queued, started, finished events that we saw for test cases, and they have similar properties as you would maybe expect. The last one is the test output subject that I mentioned earlier, and this is interesting because often a test emits an output, not just as pass-fail ratio, right? So if you're running a Cypress test, you can get a video of the recording, or if you're running Postman, you can get a hard-to-read log output, or whatever testing tool you might be using. And it would be nice, obviously, to get a reference to that. And there's a test output published event, and note that a test case run can publish multiple outputs, right? So you could get both a log, a video, and a PDF containing some kind of report. It's totally up to this testing system to decide what it can kind of produce. The things that are required here is the output type, obviously somewhat subjective of what we decided on initially as the valid values here, and the format would be a MIME type, so application, PDF, etc. Nice to hear if you, the sources you can see is required. So here we thought it was mandatory to help the receiver of this event actually receive, or actually retrieve the artifact. Because if you know there's been a PDF produced or a video, you might want to know where to actually get it, and instead of, okay, because that's probably why you're interested in it in the first place. So that's why the source is mandatory. The URI is not mandatory, which maybe it should have been, which is a more straightforward reference to the actual output that was published. And a test case run, allowing you to associate the output with the actual execution of a test case. Please note that this is not mandatory, so the only thing you might be receiving on the end is test outputs. Not very helpful, but it, once again, depends on the implementation of testing events that you're using. Also define a couple of objects that I've mentioned: test case, test suite, trigger. I don't know if we need to go through these in detail. Test cases is a test case, and a test suite is a test suite, and a trigger is a trigger. For the triggers, maybe a little bit interesting to know if, as I mentioned, triggers can be for queuing and starting test cases and test suites. So these can be manual, pipeline, an event, a schedule. So if you have a scheduled trigger, like every hour or every whatever, and other, which always references. And then there are URI reference. And this is, I think, for all these objects, there are URI references optional. So if the system that holds the test case or the test suite or the trigger can provide a URI where you can actually look at it in a web interface or an API call to retrieve the definition of that object, that's what you use. Okay, slightly more colorful and confusing slide. So just trying to model all of these. So we had the test suite run subject with the predicates queued, started, finished. The bolded tags or prop fields are required. So as you can see, the only thing that's really required here is where it's running and the ID of the test suite run, and then the outcome when it's finished. Same thing for a test case run. The only thing that's really required is the ID in the environment and the outcome. And for the test output, what's required is the format. And then the sequence or the heuristics of kind of, if you're on the receiving side and you're going to build something that reacts to these events, how you're going to want to know which events am I going to get, right? And this hasn't really been defined in the specification, and that's maybe a shortcoming. And maybe something we should at least attempt to write down, because you'd probably want to know that if I have a test suite, is there always going to be a started event? If there's a queued event, will there be a started event after that? Or what if it doesn't start? What if it just gets queued? And it cancels? Will there be a finished event with a specific outcome, etc.? And I don't think we've really, it's maybe something for us to, we've talked about it a lot, but we haven't really formalized it. Specifically also around if a test case, if there's a test suite run, that test suite run can contain multiple test cases. And as I mentioned earlier, those test cases can run in any order. They can run in parallel, they can run in sequence. So the order of those events is totally undefined. Hopefully you'll get the finished before the started for a specific test, and the queued before the started, although that's not guaranteed. So just a little bit of an attempt as heuristics here. A test suite is an orchestration of multiple test cases. A single test suite run event can contain, I'm not going to read this at you, but I think you can all get it. What's maybe important then is that the queued events are optional. The test outputs are optional. So I think the only thing today that you could expect is started and finished events for test suites and test cases. But of course, it's up to the person or the project implementing these events to implement them in as much as they want. So how would you use these events in your CI/CD pipelines? A couple of use cases, right? So one is notifications, right? You want to be notified in Slack if a test fails. It's kind of an obvious thing. If you want, maybe you want to even, we've had users who want to automatically create Jira issues, for example. If a specific thing fails, or if you have an incident management tool, you might want to get notifications into that. The other is aggregated or centralized test result management. What if you could pull all these events coming from all your different testing tools, dump them into one system that calculates creates reports and creates quality metrics and pass rate, fail ratios, etc. And you might have application lifecycle management tools like Captain or Spinnaker or others who might be interested in listening to these events and then deducing from them if they can promote releases from one place to another. So there's a bunch of different ways you can use these. And just for a little bit more color, just to kind of visualize that. So today you'd have CI/CD systems, testing tools, test orchestration frameworks, which would all kind of publish these testing events to a CD events broker, and then you could have notifications, reporting, application lifecycle management, all listening to those events and then acting accordingly. So obviously your test orchestration framework could be listening to other events and using that to run testing tools. You could have testers or DevOps people run your tests ad hoc, as I mentioned earlier, which is actually not that uncommon. And then kind of weaving this all together to hopefully kind of build out more dynamic pipelines as you deploy your applications. And I'm going to do a little bit of an example because you're maybe curious about what do these events actually look like. Let's see if this works. So TestCube is an open source project, which is, if we look at, is one of these test orchestration frameworks. I just have a simple curl test. It has support for CD events that you can configure a webhook. I'm using webhook.site here, where I'm going to receive these events. So I'm just going to start by running a simple test, which is a curl test. This is running locally on my machine, hopefully. And as you can see how we first got a test case run started event with some URI, which would actually take me to the dashboard in TestCube to look at that test. And then we got a corresponding finished event. We didn't, unfortunately, get a test output event, which is in the backlog. I'm going to nag the developers to do that. But I could, of course, I could go in here and then here see the log that was produced by curl. And this is ultimately what you would maybe want to have a test output event for, so you could retrieve that log for curl. And then correspondingly, TestCube has the concept of test suites. So this test suite here only contains that same curl test. But if I go back here and run that now, it's running locally, you're going to see all these events coming in. So there's a test suite run event, and then there's a test case run, and then there's a test case run finished, and then a test suite run finished at the end. So all those 4 events that you would expect to come in sequence come here. So TestCube allows you to orchestrate tests both in parallel and in sequence. So if I had a much more elaborate test than this one, you would have gotten a much more elaborate sequence of events that you could then react to on the other end, however you might want to, if you had plugged this into some kind of CD events bus or broker. And that was really short. So I'm going to stop there. As always, these standards really depend on people getting involved. It's easy for me from a TestCube project and Andrea and others to kind of think of what people will need based on what we've seen, but ultimately it's based on what you guys do and how you do testing and how you want to make testing part of your pipelines that drives this. So please get over to GitHub and open an issue, or just talk to me or Andrea or anyone else. And I'm, of course, happy to discuss. I'll be here for a couple of days, and I'll be at KubeCon too. And you can get these really nice plushies. They're like this big. So that's like the most popular thing. That's it. Any questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ole. Appreciate it. So we're just going to take 5 minutes just to get some chairs up on stage here for a Q&A panel, which will be starting shortly. And yeah, we'll get that on now. Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah, it's taped in.
I don't mind standing, it's fine. Hey, so we're going to have 4 panelists here. Andrea Frittoli from IBM, Andrew Frenner from Ericsson, Anna Doherty from Opsera, and Jeremy Mice. So I think we'll just get those guys on stage now and we can kick off. Yeah, see guys, I'm going to stand over here so we're have a seat and get comfortable. No worries, we're ahead of schedule anyway, so that's fine. Now, you have a mic. Hello? Hello, hello? All right, we'll kick off and Jeremy can join us when he comes back in. So a really interesting topic here for discussion in the Q&A. Very broad subject, very open. But I'm going to just read out the abstract just to give you an idea of the depth of the topic here, and then we can get into some questions and hopefully you guys have some answers. So in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape, the role of developers has become more critical than ever before. So this panel aims to delve into the intricacies of development experience, or DX, and its direct impact on productivity, innovation, and overall project success. The discussion will revolve around the strategies, the tools, the best practices, and the culture that organizations can adopt to create an environment conducive to fostering developer creativity, collaboration, and efficiency. I didn't write that. Quite wordy, but very descriptive. And I think the takeaway from that is the developer experience covers everything a developer does. Everything from the tooling, the practices, the culture, collaboration, the environment, the inclusivity, the basically everything that impacts the developer experience. And Jeremy, please, I have this seat here. I'm going to stand behind the podium there. And so there's a lot of topic here, so we're going to delve in. And I'm going to ask the first question. And I'll strong juice. Anyway, So the first question, I'm going to start with an easier one. So the developer experience is wide in scope and has many facets. From the tooling, the processes, best practices, culture, what elements of the developer experience do you feel are most impactful on productivity and innovation, and why? And this is just from your own experience, so there's obviously no right answers to this question, but what's the importance for you? So who'd like to go first?
I always think when there's an issue of dealing with people, it's all about the context of the person. Like the development experience for a junior developer on a mature project is completely different to the development experience needed by a senior developer on an experimental project. So it's fitting the experience to the context. To me, it's key, rather than just focusing on this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And developer experience is something that's subjective, I think, is a good point. Everyone has a different experience, so accommodating for all different levels of what that means. Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, they're all important, but if I have to pick one, maybe I would go with culture first. Personally, I mean, I've been contributing to open source for a bit more than 10 years, and when I started doing open source, what convinced me to stay there for the next 10 years was really the culture, and how you work together, how you build trust relationship with the other, how you really rely on like peer reviews for your work, and you value the feedback that you get. And you also kind of build and maintain your tools, and you know that you're doing that for your team and the other developers. So it's all very, the culture that is behind it, it's very important.
From my perspective, the most impact you can have is fostering continuous improvement as part of your teams, because we've all fallen victim to this is good enough, the status quo is fine, right? And that's not going to lead to innovation. That's not going to lead to creativity. And that's especially not going to lead to a developer enjoying the work that you're doing. It just becomes monotonous. But if you're feeling like you are contributing to something that's going to improve yourself and improve the business, then you feel a wider sense of satisfaction in what you're doing. So I think continuous improvement is a good first step for teams, especially.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have much more to add to any of those. Mine was going to be culture. The other kind of piece of that was just going to be kind of that freedom to fail, which kind of is a mix of culture and continuous integration of ideas and such. But it's letting your developers know that, okay, failure, if you don't learn from failure, that's one thing, but you're never going to get to something new if you don't have some failure. It's okay. But you know, the old thing like fail fast. It's important. That's how you get to a good developer experience, is being able to figure that out. So.
Awesome, thank you. I'm not part of the panel, but I definitely want to make a comment on the culture one. So I'm glad that was brought up as a key one there. And what I think Jeremy alluded to there, something we've heard referred to as psychological safety is the new buzzword. Back in the day, you would just call, creating a trust environment where people can fail fast and feel comfortable doing that. I think that's super important. And you can't really talk about developer experience without, asking a developer, do you feel comfortable to make a mistake here? Because if you don't, you're not going to get your best performance out of developers. They have to feel that they can try things, they can stretch a bit, and that there's a blameless culture. So to hear culture come on top there is super important, and it definitely resonates with me. So let's see what next we can talk about. So, let's talk about the technical aspects for a developer for a moment. So technical stuff obviously plays a huge part of the developer experience. So how important is it to streamline workflows, for example, CD or security, and how does that impact the developer experience?
In my talk, I said, if you are not engaged with the entirety of the process, if you can't commit and see where your code goes, then you feel like it's a black box. And so being able to show from beginning to end, I think is incredibly important and enabling.
I also think people have to be committed to it. Like once, if people see that it's skipped once and it's skipped for somebody else, then it really diminishes the importance of why would I do it? So it has to, even though that sounds like a contradiction of what I said before, that it's context, but it has to be a level playing field for everybody, because otherwise people see the results of their tools and they see it skipped for somebody else. So some sort of fairness of it.
Yeah, I agree that like it's important for developers to have visibility what's happening in all the stages of the pipeline. But it's also a lot to know about. So if you're developing your pipeline and you need to suddenly become like a platform expert and a security expert and a testing expert and everything, it's too much. And so I think in terms of streamlining, it's important to have platforms that enable developers to focus on what they have fun doing and where they produce value for the application or the service they're working on, but to keep visibility. And I guess that links back to some presentation from Ole, for instance, like if you have testing, your test suite sending events, or you have all your tools sending events, and you can expose what's going on to your developers through some standard approach, that really helps with that.
I think when we think about developer experience, like the amount of things I kind of mentioned in my talk around like the amount of things that we now require your dev teams and your ops teams to do creates a lot of that cognitive load that can, the more you do it, the more chance you have for mistakes. And so and that's why we've seen like this rise of platform teams, platform engineering is like taking the internal developer platforms that kind of take away that a lot of the manual work that's needed to be done. Like we as humans, we're really, really bad at manual repetitive tasks. We just are. And so like wherever that can be removed from the process for a dev to spin up a new environment, like if they need something, instead of having to put in a request to the ops team, and the ops has to go through all these different processes, even with like a good DevOps like cycle, you're still talking about a lot of cognitive load. And so the platform team kind of step up of like, let's try and create these IDPs that make it a little bit more streamlined and make it a little simpler to roll out that basic thing. If everything is all in the same environment, then there's an opportunity to make that an automated task, and then you don't have to get that cognitive load, and so that I think that gives a better, and it helps with the visibility of everything that's going, because it's in a platform. Like there's just all those things kind of trickle down from it. But I think that's where you've really got to kind of start, is remove that cognitive load, or else you're gonna, like the more you add, we already have enough distractions, like adding more is just gonna make it worse.
Awesome. Yeah, Anna, yeah.
Totally agree. And what was interesting in your brief that you described earlier, the one that you did not write, but that exists somehow in the ether, you said unlocking developer creativity. And something I think it's really important for us to talk about is the manual and automation frees up your brain space to do actual problem solving and value driving work. And so that streamlined process incredibly helps. But something else that is not technical that you all really, really need to learn about is advocating that you as a developer are creative. So I work in product marketing. So as you can imagine, I see both the engineering side of the house and the business side of the house. And I'm here to bridge the gap between those two, because you could ask any person who might be in sales or perhaps leadership, that elusive C-suite person, and they might say, developer creativity, is that an oxymoron? Is that a real thing? Right? And so it's very much about being able to communicate that, yes, developers are creative. Y'all are problem solvers. That's what you're here on Earth to do. And so being able to allow you to do those things is going to be the biggest impact.
Awesome, awesome. It's like we rehearsed this. You're setting them up here.
I just care. I care about
Absolutely, but you know, and that is one of the things. You know, companies hire very bright people, very technical people, and then they tell them how to do things. Hey, this is how we do it here, and you know, people can feel stifled and don't have that creative freedom. And you're impacting your best resource when you go and tell people how to do things. You hire them because they're bright, so give them free rein to explore and experiment and stay curious and find out new ways to do things. Which, you know, something I heard there was transparency is really important, and reducing cognitive load. Making it frictionless is important for engineers because it's going to give them more time to be creative and solve problems. But one thing I've heard about, you know, I've read about it is developers can often face resistance to change. Technical processes can be in place a long time, and companies can be quite conservative about wanting to change them up. And you can have someone who has a really smart idea and say, hey, we can do this much better, more cost effective, more efficiently. No. Let's focus on the deliverable here. Let's not mess with the, you know, we're focused on the date here, we're focused on deliverable. I don't know if you guys any experience in that sort of a challenge for developers versus delivery, and still, you know, recognizing and supporting creative freedom and allowing those changes to happen when you're against, you know, managers who have delivery dates and don't want to rock the boat because it works as it is. Appreciate your input, but maybe on the next cycle. Anyone familiar with that stuff?
Oh, maybe the IBM and Ericsson folks might have something to say about this.
Oh dear.
Absolutely. But I think it again comes back to people and the context of people. The people who are being, I will say, conservative about process change, they are probably most definitely doing their job, and they are doing their job as it is specified to them. And as soon as it becomes an us and them, you've already lost. So it's really, really important to get that there is a team that's working together to get that the changes, because the developers are probably, the creative developers are probably proposing changes that the process compliance people are having nightmares about. They're creating stress there. So if there isn't a team working across it, the developers being happy, they're not more important, I think, than the compliance people. But equally, the compliance people have to not be more important than the developers.
Yeah, I think it's about, you know, you mentioned the compliance people. Security is another one. The security people are super conservative about changing anything up. You know, it's secure now. If you go and make changes, I'm not sure is that going to be as secure or more secure, but I don't really want to take that risk. And depending on kind of, you know, the security level or the production rating of what it is, they can be more risk averse than looking for creative ways to improve things. So yeah, and you know, you mentioned something there, relationships. You know, bringing down the barriers between different groups is super important, and obviously transparency plays an important part of that. But I think as developers, we can think about things technically, but really relationships are super important to get things done and bringing down the barriers. If you can understand the context of why someone's trying to do something, you can absolutely get more on board and support where they're coming from. Which kind of, let's talk for a couple of minutes about collaboration and communication. They're obviously key parts of the developer experience, and we've heard around, you know, different subgroups within companies. You know, communication and context between those is super important. What methods or technologies, and keep this open, can we use to leverage and improve that collaboration, that transparency, that communication, so that we can all be more on the same page? And you know, totally open. It can be technical. You know, it might be, you know, one thing, for example, we've seen is people doing more live shares, sharing their code and explaining it in real time rather than just opening the PR, or, you know, so that can be developer to developer. In my role, I've had to set context with less technical people around why we're doing something and break it down, which is an important one as well. Sometimes it's easier in person to talk through stuff and get someone on side, and then they can support their people and you can all get aligned. But alignment is not like a one-way street where it's like, everyone read this and we'll all be aligned. So you really have to, you know, there's technical alignment, there's business alignment. But have you any experiences in those kind of arenas where you might have some advice or opinion?
Well, I first wanted to say something about the previous question still, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think to really, promote like creativity, trying new technologies and so forth, one problem is often friction that you might have. So like if you have a system where you have your platform, you have your security checks, you have your evidence store, a lot of components integrated together, and you want to experiment with one of these components and you want to see if it goes well, then you may risk, say, creating job for the other teams because, okay, now, yeah, it works fine for me, yeah, but what about the compliance team? What about the other teams? And so they need to go and verify and integrate with what you're trying, and so it becomes all very more complicated and more work for everyone. And I think in this context, really, what we're trying to do also as a CD Foundation, trying to build a more interoperable ecosystem, so where tools can work with each other out of the box. This would really help, like experimenting with new technologies, because if you can bring in a new tool and replace it with or use it in parallel to the one that you're using now, but this tool out of the box will create like data that your existing platform can consume. So then you have this data and you can go to the other teams or to the stakeholders and say, well, look, I'm using this tool and this is how it behaves, this is like what the data that it produced, and then you can take a decision on that without having to, rebuild everything from scratch.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, because I think that's the single biggest problem is when one change just has this monstrous ripple effect through the whole system, then everybody gets afraid of it. Once it happens once, then everybody's terrified of any change in the future. The whole idea of something like CD events can help to separate that out. I think it's a key thing.
So, to go to your question.
And just, yeah, so this is around how we can, I guess, improve collaboration and communication, is it? Is that what I asked last?
Yeah.
I got sidetracked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the key, if we're not, I mean, how do I want to say this? It has to be modeled from the top down. If leadership, and especially like from C-suite down, if they're not modeling that level of transparency and that level of communication and asynchronous and like all of that those practices, it's not going to happen. It's kind of like whenever you have a process in place and then someone says, oh, well, we're using Asana, let's now start using Trello instead. Well, it's great, but if it doesn't fit into your normal thing and not everybody's doing it, and then there's 5 different teams using 6 different things, none of that happens. It has to start from the top. And so your leadership has got to like just really drive into communicating and being transparent and talking about the tools that they use and using them themselves. I know so many companies that the CEO, the CTO, all the C-suite, like they don't even use the tools that everybody else does. They get special exceptions so that they can use their own little thing, and next thing you know, they happen to be in a Zoom call and they happen to share their screen for something, and everybody's like, why are they not, like, I've seen it happen time and time again, and that doesn't create a level of like of trust around any of the processes you use when those in leadership don't do them. So I think that's like a core piece for that.
And I will hearken back to my earlier diatribe about continuous improvement. And I think that building communication is a skill. And so if you endeavor to try to do it every single day, just like you practice coding, just like you practice problem solving, you practice communication too. And it's okay to not be good at it, right? It's not about being a good communicator. It's about being on the level of your team. And your team is communicating what you're doing, the value you're producing every single day, and it's trickling up to the people who are going to write your check. And it's also going back to the other teams who you're working with. So just endeavoring to be more communicative in your job is already a first step versus just siloing yourself off.
I love that, Jeremy. Love that. That's definitely something that's important, having technical leadership. You know, sometimes when you go up the chain, especially as a company scales, and I think that does impact the developer experience. Developers should be able to look up the chain and feel inspired and feel that the people in leadership get it technically, understand the challenges, have awareness, have insights, can offer support on what those challenges are. I mean, you know, the worst case scenario is you know, very hierarchical, big company where when you go up the chain, they have no idea what you're working on. They've heard the buzzword, but they don't know what it is. I think that can definitely affect developer motivation and can also affect the credibility they have that they're doing the right thing and they have that support. So I think that's super important. We're going for the big guns today. Let's keep it non-political here. I want to have a job at the end of this. But you're spot on, though. Absolutely. Technical leadership is a huge part of the developer experience.
The good part is only the good ones are watching this.
Spot on. Touche. One thing you mentioned there, Anna, and maybe you can start with this one. You mentioned around not everybody communicates the same way. And something that we're hearing a lot about now is around neurodiversity and, you know, cognitive diversity. People think about problems differently. People see problems differently. People communicate differently. And we've seen that companies who are very successful in this space have very, very, very diverse groups within their company. They don't, you know, it used to be, for example, we used to hire in a particular way in IT in general, where we'd look for someone coming from third level, and, you know, you end up with groupthink then. You're hiring the people who've come from the same lecture for the last 5 years, and they're all thinking the same. And now companies are recognizing the value of hire someone who didn't go to college and try to do a startup and has all these different experiences that feed into developer experience and technical experience. So companies are becoming more open to that, more aware of that. It's a huge subject, but when you think about neurodiversity or diversity in general, what comes to mind? Because long gone are the days where diversity was just gender-based. Diversity is so layered now and impacts development. And I'm sure you guys all have an opinion or, you know, something to say about that. But Anna, what do you think about that?
I was like, oh, you singled me out. I wonder why. Must be the autism. You're like, oh, she's definitely. No, it's true. It's much more intersectional than it used to be. Diversity isn't just gender, it isn't just race, it isn't just background. It's also different ways of thinking across all of those things. And so if you are bringing in people of other not neurotypical ways of thinking, then your problem-solving capabilities are expanded. That's the very foundation of it, is like, if you're trying to solve a problem, that's what products do, that's what software does. And if it's not doing that, what are you even in here for, right? But if you're trying to solve a problem, then you need creative thinkers. You need like a Benedict Cumberbatch, like a Sherlock, right? He can go into his mind palace and come up with some crazy thing you would have never thought of. So yeah, I think neurodiversity improves, but it also is intersectional with other cultural differences that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, and just on that, Anna, yeah, you know, I remember a large company at least 5 years ago, maybe more, and they started to actually focus on people who are autistic and creating, like, they want to have a 1% workforce who is autistic and actively seek out those people for an advantage over. Probably. I think they're still quite successful. I can't remember the exact name, so I won't guess, but it was a huge company. But back when they did that, it was transformational and seen as, wow, this is so progressive. And now it's like, if you're not doing that, it's like you're dated. So things are starting to change pretty quickly, which is fantastic. And I think it's giving companies a competitive edge to expand their creative paint palette, if you will, by looking at all types of you know, non-neurotypical, which is a great term, people, which I think all of us to some extent are non-neurotypical, I think.
But,
Andrew?
My experience, there are some people, and we've talked a lot about here about creative and problem solving and all those good things that we want. And for an amount of people, that's terrifying. That's like they want it to be the same as it was yesterday. And that's their safe space. Right, and actually that's their productive space. putting them in a continuously changing environment, they're just not productive at all. So I think even in our creativity, we have to make sure not to be excluding those people, because we need those people. Those people in a lot of ways are much more productive. If they're happy and producing what they've been, they will do a job that I'll never do, because they'll do the same job and they'll do it again and they'll do it well. I'll try to change it and break it, and everybody will be unhappy. So we have to match up both.
Excellent point, yeah.
What to add? Well, in my personal experience, especially if I'm trying something new, trying to do continuous innovation or improvement, sorry, I guess the worst feedback that I can get is just total agreement. Like, yep, you're doing the right thing, or yep, that's fine. So you need kind of feedback, like different ideas, different opinions, someone like challenging what you're saying and say, well, do you really want to do that? Do you really want to do it that way? Or why do you want to do that? And so forth. And I found in my personal experience, again, like more challenge in diverse environments from different point of view. And this is also something that I started experiencing more when I started doing open source, because you have people from working for different companies, so coming with different cultures, working in different countries as well. So you find very different kind of diversity there. And I find that really stimulating and enriching experience.
Yeah, and I think that's, I guess, what we were saying around creating the environment where it's okay to have an opinion that's maybe counter to what's currently happening. And not only is it okay, it's encouraged. Hey, what are your thoughts on this? I don't agree. Oh, okay, why not? And have those conversations and be comfortable having them, that you're not challenging someone who's a grade above or who's made this, and and developing that communication where you can communicate around your opinion on something without people getting offended, because everyone knows that's the culture here, and you can be respectful and give your opinion, and it's respected, which is really important. And I think as well that does come from the top down, which we already said. People, when they join companies, they do look to leadership. What's the established culture here? What's the established norm? So super important. So just a couple more questions then. I had a note on happy developers. Developer happiness is obviously a key part of the developer experience. So for yourselves, like, what does that mean to you in your role? Maybe you're not hands on keyboard every day, but developer happiness, what does it mean to you guys? Because I think it is definitely subjective in many ways.
Oh, wow. I guess I'll take it first.
Yeah, we'll give it to the guy with the beer. He knows how to have happiness, right?
Right. It's just pizza and beer, right? That's all you need for development.
Boom,
That's
mic
all.
drop.
They'll work 40 hours a day, if you just give them pizza and beer. And you can do it 40 times a day if you're 40 hours a day if you're a 10x developer, right? Sorry, bad joke. No, I think, yes, it is subjective. And I think it's important to, this comes to a leadership culture, I think is a good, probably a big part of that answer. Because just as we've identified, like, not everybody does things the same way, and not everybody responds, all of those things, not everybody is happy the same way. And so the leadership, and it's really important for them to understand those that are on their team, and make those reasonable accommodations for how you interact as a leader with those on your team, to understand the things that they do, understand what makes them want to work. What makes them want to do, really drive a new feature? What are they like? What is it that makes them get up every day and want to come into work? Some people, it is the paycheck, and that is okay. Like it's this whole thing about like, well, passion. No, it's okay for people to come to work the way that they need to. And so, getting to that, there is no universal way to do it, I guess, is the thing. So I think it comes down to leadership and culture to create that space where people have the opportunity to express themselves and to do the things that can make them happy while also doing the things that they were hired to do.
I used to work in video games, so you want to talk about a happy developer, is a developer that enjoys using their own tool, right? And so if you like playing your own video game, that's a good sign. And so that's how I think about it, is if it's painful or boring or stupid and you don't want to use it, then no other developer will want to do so. So I think developers' happiness is crucial in determining whether or not what you're putting out is good.
Yeah, totally agree. Two examples that just came in my mind there in recent experience was around the drive to promote open source and build a community in Fidelity. Not one developer came back, and we've had about more than 200 contributions in the last year. Not one developer came back and said, that sucked, that was a waste of time. Everyone got a sense of gratification out of contributing to something wider than the company, which is, you know, again, finding those opportunities to make people happy. You listen to what they want to do and provide the space to do it. I think one other one then is around, we have an initiative in Fidelity, Learning Days, giving 20% of time back to developers to focus on their own exploration, not related to the backlog, but go away and something else you want to explore in your own time, and then see if there's anything that relates that can come back into the backlog work. So you're giving people space to think outside the box on something different. And then maybe they're going to work on an open source contribution on that learning day, or maybe they're going to jump on a different project with somebody else, but it's giving them time away from that constant 9-to-5 backlog work.
Yes, it comes down to leadership culture, that this is an investment, right? Developer time is valuable, and these investments are worth it. And so being able to communicate as a leadership team why you're doing these things, why you're enabling these things, and being able to communicate as a development team why you want those things, right, is crucial, and that you're both speaking the same language. Again, very much comes down to, we need to reach across this perceived gap between business leadership and developers.
And I might add with that is, as a leader, you also need to model that. So if, you know, we have model that taking the same time for happiness, taking the same, 20% time. If you're wanting your team to do it, you need to model it as well. So any leaders out there, like, do it yourself. In the U.S., in messed up, all the healthcare and like PTO and all that stuff that's just, a little backwards. It is very common that people don't take their time off. And when quizzed about it, there's been a number of studies recently that have said, like, they don't do it, especially in this, like, free, unlimited PTO, which, okay, great, but if they don't see their leadership taking it, then the implication is, well, if I take it and they're not, then I'm taking too much, and so they won't take it. And so, because they're not seeing leadership model it. And so all of these things we're talking about, like, leadership has to model it in order for a good developer experience, for developer, all of that stuff, it has to start. I keep harping on that, but I think it fits so well into this thing about what makes you happy.
Super, super. Andrew, your comment?
I think two comments. One, I think people for long-term happiness to a business contribution, to be working towards an overarching goal that they're happy with. And it can be a very, very long-term goal. It can be abstract, but I think that's what will make people do extraordinary things in their own life and in business. But it's really hard to find those things. And the other thing is, I think, to try and get the emphasis on being that teams deliver things, not individuals, because teams deliver 10 times more than individuals. Even though it can be one individual might seem to be the biggest contributor, but for long-term sustainability, it has to be the teams.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. So we're just up on time, but I just want to take a couple of moments to thank our panelists here. Super engaging Q&A. Definitely very on point remarks there, I would say. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today as well. We had a broad range of topics and they were very engaging, so thank you to those. I'd like to thank the CDF for the opportunity to facilitate today, which was a fantastic experience. It all worked technically. Thank you guys at the back as well. And just wishing you all a great week ahead. If you're staying for the summit, I hope you get a lot of benefit out of it and hope you enjoy your time here in Bilbao. Thank you very much. Happy to help.
Great job, Jamie.
Seriously, is that a beer?
Down at the coffee shop.
Are they giving us more of those tokens every day, or? I saw we had 2 tokens. Yeah, so they gave us 2 tokens. You didn't give a token either?
No, I just went and paid for it.
That's where I'm going.
You bring a different perspective, being from what traditionalist,
Try to say this without insulting us.
established, right? Established.
Yeah, if you're going to stop on, we can.